Welcome, everyone, to the August 15th, 2022 regular Board of Aldermen meeting. Would everybody please join with me saying the Pledge of Allegiance? Roll call.
Alderman Plufka.
Here.
Alderwoman Tice.
Here.
Alderwoman Sims.
Here.
Alderman Weggie.
Here.
Alderman Gould.
Here.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Here.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Here.
Alderman Shelton.
Here.
All members are present.
Great, thank you. Next on the agenda is approval or amendment of the agenda. Do we have any changes? Any objection to approving the same by acclamation? Seeing none, it'll be so approved. Thank you. Brings us down to item 4, announcements, appointments, proclamations, recognitions, and presentations. We have one item, and that is by Elise and Spence with Jacobs.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. Hi. I would say it's good to be here, but we've had some spectacular events. We did have a catastrophic rainfall, but you know, within all of that damage, there is also some good news. The city's been able to do mitigation, and Brentwood Bound performed as expected. But I think that it's important to really understand how the rainfall fell. I think you can see in the news that everyone says it was horribly catastrophic. I'll tell you, I woke up in the morning and I heard rain. And I immediately went and looked at the stream gauge and couldn't believe how high it was. My husband was worried about our basement, but I'm just like, heck with the basement. How's the project doing? It should still be okay. You know, or doing, you know, better than it would have otherwise. And so, of course, I really wanted to dive, being an engineer, I wanted to dive into the numbers and see what the heck happened. So as you know, the National Weather Service put out a lot of information as things went on. They're still developing their postmortem of the event, but what we do know is 25% of St. Louis's normal annual rainfall fell in 12 hours. It exceeded its normal rainfall amount for July and August in just 6 hours. That's phenomenal. Whenever we design for a project in metropolitan St. Louis, a lot of times that 6-hour event is actually the critical duration, that amount of rain. It rained exactly 6 hours, which makes it easy to figure out, you know, how bad it is, because you kind of know those numbers. So I'm watching the news and my husband's like, I'm like, well, I know that we just went over that amount of water in 6 hours, and that is not good for anyone. Lambert Airport got about 7.7 inches of rain in 6 hours. At that airport gauge, that really does have a 1 in 1,000 chance of occurring in any given year. I heard someone call this a once in a millennium event. And so that can give the perception that, gosh, we don't have to worry about this until like sometime in the year 3000 when there's spaceships flying around. But that's not really true. I mean, you have a 1 in 1,000 chance of it happening in any given year. So I'll start talking in percentages later in the presentation, because I think that's a misnomer that we have with how we refer to these with these floods in the profession. 7.3 inches is the normal amount of rain in July and August combined. If you look at historic storm events in the St. Louis area, they're usually in July and August. So that says a lot, that was our maximum for those. The other thing that's very interesting is when I saw this, I'm like, that can't be the first ever flash flood emergency that the National Weather Service has issued, right? Surely they've issued one. So I was like, what is that? Why is that meaningful? And it's reserved for rare instances when significant threat to life and property exists. Brentwood was included in that area, as well as the city of St. Louis, where I live, which is very unusual. It was the first one they have ever issued. So, I mean, I know I'm talking a lot of doom and gloom here, but that's what happened. Some of the facts that they've tweeted out and that they've given are just astounding. It's the most prolific one we've ever had since they started keeping records in 1874. They shattered that all-time record by 7 a.m. It wasn't even done raining at 7 a.m., 8.06 inches in Lambert, which is just north of you. That's more than the 1915 Galveston hurricane. So lots of facts. I encourage you, if you Google National Weather Service storms summary, they've got a really great tool out there that helps walk you through a lot of this information. But what I want to do in the interest of time is to bring it into what does it mean for Brentwood. So there's 2 creeks that we're going to talk about, and I'll show you where they are on the map. Black Creek is to the east. Deer Creek is the one that crosses the bulk of the watershed. Black Creek had 0.2 to 0.1% annual chance. That's the 500 to 100-year event. Typically, we design for the 100-year, and that's bad. Okay, the 100-year is bad, and you're not going to hear that number very often here because it was bad. Deer Creek, upstream of Black Creek, also hit 0.5% to 0.2%. That's in any given year, 200 to 500 years. Thank goodness it was dry before, dry soils. That makes a huge difference. If the soils are wet when a rain like that hurts, I honestly don't want to know what would have happened at those stream gauges on July 26th. So this is what the National Weather Service looks like. There's a service you can go to as it's raining, and you can look and see what personal gauges say and what National Weather Service gauges say. So this is the information I was looking at the very beginning. And the nice thing they do is a first look at how that radar rectifies. And so we plunked the Deer Creek watershed on top of that. So the light blue is where you get those 1,000-year 0.1% chance totals. As you can see, good chunk of the watershed is blue, so that's not good. And so this is the slide that shows you, if you look on the left, we're zooming in on the Deer Creek watershed a little bit. There's 37 square miles of storm runoff that heads towards the downstream end of this watershed, which is where the Brentwood Bound project area is. There's 22 different municipalities that also drain towards that. And then you've got Black Creek, is that vertical arrow you see on the right? That's where Black Creek is. That's basically everything from U City, Clayton. The watershed basically goes from 44 up, 270 on the left, and Olive down. All of that area, all of that water essentially makes its way to you, unfortunately. And it makes it fast. Just because it can be a little hilly on the upper end. And when the rain falls that fast, it can't go into the ground when it falls that hard too. So there were a lot of complicating factors. That's why that 6-hour storm event is so critical. So this gets into, we are very data rich in St. Louis. So this is the July 26th event again. So what you see here is you can see Deer Creek is labeled. That's the creek that goes from the upper left down to the lower right. Black Creek is the one on the upper right. It's more vertical. If you look at that upper corner on University City, so these are just points, but it's unusual for a city to have this many point rainfall gauges. MSD owns and operates these. I don't know what happened in between these points. It could be higher, could be lower, but the general trend was high on the upper left for this storm event and a little bit lower as you go down, but in this case, a little bit lower is like still the 100-year event, which is just astonishing. So you got that 1,000-year event, 0.1% on the upper end, 9.37 inches fell in 6 hours. Across the core of the watershed really looks like, I mean, the bulk of it, best case scenario, was the 200-year. So then what happens when we look at both storms together? I hang out with our meteorologist at work. He immediately called me when this was happening. I was like, what is going on over there? So whenever you look at it he pointed out, it was also astonishing to look at it for the full 72 hours, the 26th to the 28th. Again, Black Creek went to that 200-year to 1,000-year. Deer Creek upstream of Black Creek. Finally, we got to the 100-year, which is the 1% chance to 0.2%. And again, you could kind of still consider the soils to be dry because so much of it ran off dry at the start of the 72 hours. So again, you can look if you look at this, Brentwood the Deer Creek watershed just got nailed. Almost 16 inches to the northeast there. I do this for a living. I seriously had people in Europe and across the world. I work globally, and the people were calling me like, what is happening? That doesn't happen. Like, well, it just did. We have joined a club, unfortunately. So again, this is kind of similar. You see the 0.1% in the upper right. You go down to, just the lowly 100-year on the lower left. And you can see Brentwood Bound located there. And those red crosses are where the data points that I have are. I will also say that MSD does take their gauges and they get high resolution radar data and they rectify it. They're able to correct the radar. So those radar bands I was showing earlier may or may not be accurate because it's so quick, you've got to go through and do an extra analysis. And MSD is in the process of doing that. And I had the privilege of seeing just on the screen a little bit of theirs today. And it's similar to what I showed. What I'm showing here with these color bands is just a simple average. Okay, I'm not going to pretend that that's exactly what happened with the colors, but it gives you an idea. So August, then it happened again, August 3rd and 4th. So I'm looking at it with the whole analysis between those two storm events. Deer Creek had the 10% to the 1%, only the 100-year, which is honestly still pretty catastrophic, but the heavy rainfall was centered on the core of the watershed. And I'll show you what I mean. The soils were wet, which means when it hits that hard, it just sheets straight off. And you had not one, but two intense periods of rainfall in that 16-hour period. So there was historic rain the previous week that saturated those soils. It was centered on the core of that watershed. National Weather Service stats, it was the wettest 2-week period ever recorded in St. Louis, because why should we stop breaking records? There were 15 inches of rain from July 24th through 9 a.m. on August 4th, and that was at Lambert. There were places that had more. Lambert was not the highest rainfall totals that were seen in the region. The Rock Hill stream gauge, I know that you hear about what happens up at Rock Hill, and they flooded. I mean, it kind of reminded me of Ike and other storm events. What happened up there, unfortunately. You know, lots of damage, loss of property. Thank goodness there was no loss of life. But it exceeded major flood stage 4 times in 10 days, and it did not dry out. If you were to zoom this in, you would see that it doesn't even go all the way back down in between the two. So again, that's just astounding. And all of the water that goes through that Rock Hill stream gauge flows through to Brentwood bound, and more water is added to that before it hits you, unfortunately, because water is lazy and it goes downstream. So this is what we call a hyetograph. This is just basically shows you a chart of how much rainfall fell in 5-minute increments, MSDS high data. This is the highest gauge that they captured. The radar correction that I saw today went notably higher than that 6.22 inches. I don't actually have the data, so I'm not going to say what the number was, but it was impressive. 0.6 inches in 5 minutes, 2.5 inches at that first shot of rain on right before midnight, and another almost 4 inches after midnight. 2 inches in 45 minutes, 3.3 inches in 2.5 hours, right after having already had a historic storm event. So, I mean, this was just, it was not good. So if you look here, this is what the National Weather Service looked like right through the middle of the watershed, the really dark red for the first 6 hours. And when you look at the first 12 hours, you add the purple. I captured these as it was raining. So this is not corrected radar, but this is based off of the gauges that are available and what the National Weather Service had handy. It shows a lot of rain. So here, MSD didn't have a gauge where I suspected it fell the hardest, up in the middle upper of the watershed. So if you look at these, you see that band that's just solid red all the way up. That is replicated, and actually I think the high point was a little bit further north in the watershed. So that whole core of the watershed does appear that it was hit by pretty hard rain. You can see that Rock Hill stream gauge there. I have it labeled. So that core was about 100 year, if not more. Greater than 100 year was what I got when I really crunched the numbers and did the full analysis with the way us engineers come up with that. And so again, all of that water coming towards you. So how does the big question, right? How does this compare to the previous storm events? So there have been 26 floods since 1957, and this is a picture of what a lot of them looked like. So I'm going to show you what the peak flow rates were at that Rock Hill gauge coming up. Just keep in mind, this is what Manchester Road at Brentwood bound looked like. Christmas 2015, there were boats. Even 2020, 2008, 2016. So this has a lot of data to think about, but it shows you how successful the project has been, and it's not fully constructed yet. So to explain this to you, what you see on the left, the blue bars are before the project. The green and orangish bars are after the project. All of them on the left flooded on Manchester Road. On August 4th, there was 60% more water went through that Ladue gauge. Brentwood bound did not flood on August 4th. There was 1 foot of water on Manchester Road. We did a quick and dirty analysis. There would have been 4 feet of water on Manchester Road at least with that event. And that was, you know, pretty historic, that July 26th event. As compared to Tropical Storm Ike, which was also huge. And also did a lot of damage, which exceeded the August 4th. 60% more water at Ladue Gauge in 2015, 46% more in 2016, 51% more in 2019, and pretty darn close to 2020. All of those events flooded Manchester Road, and they probably would not have had they happened again with the project. So I hope that shows that the project was effective as designed. So that was just to think what 4 feet of water would have looked like out there again, you know? See if I had any other notes. Yeah, that's what I have.
Great, thanks, Elise. And again, just to drive home the point, so the 4 rain events that we had, July 26th, 28th, August 3rd, and August the 4th. July 26th, as Elise said, it was the 1,000-year flood
to, yeah.
event, to put it into context that we can all understand. And in prior rain events, where we had less rain and Manchester Road flooded, compare that to the 3 of the last 4 events that took place the last week of July and the first week of August. As Lee said, we had 60% more rain flow through that gauge in Ladue, yet Manchester Road did not have a problem. And so I think under any standard, only conclusions you can come from with that is the flood mitigation has been successful in achieving the goal, with the goal being to keep water off Manchester Road following a 100-year flood event. That's what it was designed to do, and it worked on those 3 occasions when we, in fact, we had more than a 100-year flood event and still kept water off Manchester Road. So yeah, I don't say that when I say that, I will obviously acknowledge that there were businesses that suffered, there were residents that were suffered, whole areas throughout St. Louis County suffered, and we're not trying to minimize what they went through, but as far as Brentwood Bound is concerned and the flood mitigation portion of that project, it did exactly what it was intended to do. And I asked Elise to go through this and to present this to you so that you would have an understanding of what all took place over those two weeks. So if you have any questions for her, please feel free to ask away. Alderman Plufka.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Actually, my question, I'm not sure if it's going to be for you or if it's going to be for Navigate. We talk about the fact that the Brentwood Bound, the flood mitigation part of this is still not completed, specifically the eastern end where the bridge is still being dropped and being changed, and then also where I don't know if the lines where the basins have been created are at their final, lines of where they're going to be. And so I guess what I was asking is, do you believe that the remaining, at this point, not completed flood mitigation aspects, that they would further increase the capacity of the Brentwood Bound mitigation project to hold additional water should we have an event? Obviously, we're going to have an event when we have an event in the future.
Yeah, the way those work is they actually bleed a little water off of Black Creek to help the backwater situation and hold it in our site in those ponds. The way the overall project works, it's an interesting exercise. If you look back at old aerial photos, you can look and see that we're essentially restoring the natural floodplain to what was there before the 50s, before we had all of these problems. The solution ended up being somewhat similar to that before it all got filled. So it's interesting that was the one thing that worked. It's basically move the dirt, the water can go there, it can go where it used to be.
Right.
To the natural
This is
floodplain.
not a levee system. This is a system
No.
of passive water retention, if for nothing else. I mean, it's been described to me at various times, and our former mayor at one point, I think, made the point really well when he said, we don't have a flooding problem here as much as a pooling problem because of the lack of a
Gotta go
change in
somewhere.
elevation. And that this project works off of that. It allows us to store additional water without putting additional stress downstream, and hopefully without encumbering the street and the businesses along Manchester Road.
Yeah, if you can give water somewhere to go and hang out, it's lazy.
Right.
It's going to do it. I mean, I know I just really simplified my job, but I mean, there's a lot more math that goes with it than that. But that's the principle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Alderman Lockmuller.
Sorry about that. We know, but maybe the audience doesn't know what we've still got yet to do down there. So would you be able to just expound on that?
I need Craig and Spence's help on that one.
Here, he's right behind you, Elise. Here he comes.
Craig.
Hi, Craig with Navigate. So primarily in the phase 1 area, it's more landscaping, it's more minor stormwater items, not too much in the whole flood mitigation that will benefit the flood mitigation project, but it's phase 2, which is the eastern part of the project, and that is there's a big pond at Breckenridge Industrial Court that still needs to be constructed, another pond where the former business Frederick Roofing was, along with all the stream channel improvements that go from the Breckenridge Industrial Court Bridge that's being constructed right now, all the way down to Breckenridge Materials. So stream channel improvements and 2 ponds, along with a new bridge, all of those components will greatly help the flood mitigation.
Thank you.
Alderman Gould.
Yes, and so just as a point of clarification, when you say that there wasn't water on Manchester Road, there was water on Manchester Road
At
on
the
all of
Brentwood
those.
bound.
But, well, in the Brentwood bound area, but I think what I looked at, the water didn't come from Deer Creek. It was water runoff from streets for MSD that then ended up on Manchester, but certainly didn't flood like it normally would. Is that
That is true.
a good assessment?
Yeah. One interesting thing with what you saw around a lot of the city, right? That was that same dynamic. It's a lot of the choice that we've made with our urban flooding infrastructure. And as we see more of these events, it doesn't keep up. Those only hold 10 to 20 to 25 years across the country. So St. Louis, it's like the 20-year.
And and you may not know this, but as it relates to the work that MSD is doing along Manchester and where the tunnel is going to be and all of that stuff, they're not completed with their project as well either. Is that right? Or are there more
I'm not
MSD
sure on
tunnels
project
or pipes or anything like that are going along Manchester Road that will help with some of that? Okay.
Yeah, that's huge. Yeah, and haven't worked on that project, so I can't comment on it a whole lot.
Understood.
But it is
I know
related
that's
to
an MSD
Project
question.
Clear, which is more water quality focused than flood mitigation focused.
Okay, it's good to know. Thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, great.
Well,
Okay.
thank you for listening to an engineer.
Thank you, Elise. Appreciate your
gonna-
time in doing that.
The audience allowed to ask a question?
No, we're not.
What about Brentwood Boulevard between Manchester and Marshall Road?
During citizen comments, you'll have an opportunity to come up and speak to the board. However long it takes to get there. So next item under the agenda is item 5, public hearing. We have 2 items. First is an amendment to Ordinance 5003 regarding the conditional use permit for kitchen conservatory at 9001 Manchester Road for revised elevations to the prior approved plans. So with that, I will gavel open the public hearing for the amendment to Ordinance 5003. Anybody in the public care to address that? Kelly, are you wanting to speak to that? Or Whitney, are you wanting to speak to that?
Whitney Kelly on behalf of the city of Brentwood. This is a public hearing for you tonight as the original CUP was initially approved back in 2020. That lapsed, and then in February of 2022, they sought a new CUP. However, they looked at their cost benefit and looked at revising their elevation, and as part of the CUP, the ordinance approved it, specifically referenced those elevations. They are seeking an amendment to provide for the new elevations tonight. It did, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
It did receive approval at the Planning and Zoning Commission by a vote of 8-1. So,
Any questions for Whitney on this? It's coming up later on the agenda, obviously. So if anybody in the public cares to speak to that issue and that issue only, now is the time to do so. Do we have anybody online? No?
No, sir.
Okay, so I will gavel close the public hearing for an amendment to Ordinance 5003. And the second public hearing is a public hearing to discuss the estimated allocation of $20,000 in community development block grant funds available after January 1st, 2023. With that, I gavel open the public hearing for that matter.
Whitney Kelly on behalf of the city of Brentwood. Every year, the city participates with the St. Louis County Community Development Block Grant for $20,000 for home improvement program. It is generally $5,000 annually to income eligible participants. However, I received a letter today that has been increased starting September 1st to $7,500. So we recommend continuing that program with St. Louis County.
Okay, thank you. Anybody in the public care to speak to that issue? Now is the time to do so. Seeing none, we will gavel close public hearing. Brings us down to citizen comments. Now is the time when anybody in the public wishes to address the board. Feel free to do so. Only thing that we ask is that you come down to the podium, state your name and address. You will be given up to 3 minutes. And just keep in mind, this is not a question and answer session of the meeting. It is simply public comment. It's an opportunity for you to comment on any matter. So with that, I'll open up public comment.
Yeah, good evening. My name is David Nooner. I'm at 3015 South Brentwood, which is on Brentwood Boulevard across from the Bi-State Bus Garage. And I don't hear anyone addressing Brentwood Boulevard from Manchester Road to Marshall Road. And I can tell you, we had 3 days in a row where we had 4 to 5 feet of water on Brentwood Boulevard in front of the Bi-State Bus Garage, including in front of my building and including Millman Lumber Company, who's my neighbor. And if you saw the lumber floating down Manchester Road, Brentwood Boulevard, going through the brand-new Brentwood Commons project, I stood at the railroad tracks on 3 different occasions over those 3 days, and there were 3 to 4 to 5 feet of water rushing to that Brentwood Commons area. Trucks underwater, and if that's a success, then I'm missing something. And I noticed the young lady from Jacobs disappeared as soon as her presentation was over. I would just love for you all to address what is going to happen on Brentwood Boulevard between Manchester and Marshall Road. Is this project that you're putting forward, that you're spending tens of millions of dollars on, is it going to solve and alleviate that problem on Brentwood Boulevard? I would appreciate some sort of response either this evening or sometime down the road after you've had a chance to digest that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name's Megan Harris, and I live at 8706 Rosalie Avenue. I'm here for a couple of reasons. First, to say thank you. My husband is a small business owner, and we were impacted by the recent flooding in late July, early August, and the Brentwood community, Alderman Weggie, Mayor Demet came out and helped us. People that, support our business, family members, friends, people that we don't even know from Brentwood came out and helped us. So to me, it was really a life-changing event for me in terms of believing in people and learning what it really feels like to be helped. So I'm really glad that I live here, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew we already know what a wonderful place Brentwood is, but it really came home for me that day. On a more tactical note, I really did appreciate hearing the engineering perspective and all the numbers for what happened with the water. I understand it was, an epic event, unprecedented, but similar to the concerns on Brentwood Boulevard, I would like to understand what the plans are for Black Creek. As you kind of go up and down Black Creek, there south of Litzinger, it appears to be extremely filled with debris and tree roots and old bridge material. So, it just seems like if water was able to flow through there better, you might save a couple of inches when you do experience those flooding events. I'm wondering if we could understand what the plans are there. And then also, around the county, we are seeing a ton of development, which is great for a lot of reasons. But the rest of the county is, at a higher elevation than us. So I really would like to understand, and I could probably go to the county council meetings to understand this, but I'd like to understand what the city is doing to ensure that the rules are being followed for drainage considerations in all of those developments. Thinking about the Costco development that's happening and things like that. They're putting concrete, they're putting asphalt everywhere. Are they following the rules when it comes to, allowance for water storage in those big projects across the county, to make sure that we're not continuing to have, more and more watershed in this area? And the last point, I think we all have seen the news about the development that is, proposed on Manchester, which is really exciting. I think, we're all really excited about that. But I would like to understand what the drainage and flood mitigation plans are that are going to be followed with that project as well, just to ensure that it won't, in itself, end up causing more problems. So, again, thank you all for your support and everything you've done so far. I think, what we have seen has been somewhat of a success, and it just proves that we can continue to get better.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi there. I'm Dr. Jonathan Mell. I'm here representing Custom Technologies LLC on 8255 Brentwood Industrial. So I figured this was a good time to come up here and make a few remarks. The last citizen who was able to speak said they were excited about this development. I'm surprised by this development proposal that is coming up down here on new business, resolution number 1382. Mostly because it was the first time I had heard about it when I heard it in the STL Today article last week. I see there's some slides over there of some proposed buildings. And one of the most surprising things about it is that this new proposed plan is going to do a whole new batch of eminent domain, whole bunch of new proposals, all of which seem to be going to what may appear to be carte blanche towards a new massive developer who has proposed this plan and seems to think the whole area is blighted, better go, has to go away, has to be bulldozed, put down. We're going to have a microbrewery in that blighted area. Fourth microbrewery on Manchester, I think. That's going to be something we need. I was surprised about this, and I was concerned because Custom Technologies and our neighbors in that building and those commercial buildings which exist there right now, we certainly don't think we're blighted. We certainly think that we have been in a building that has been producing, manufacturing goods, engineering things. Last STL Today article about our business was 2 years ago, actually, when we were congratulated for trying to build emergency ventilators for COVID. We were one of the first people that did it, first people in St. Louis, I believe, and now we're blighted. Now we got to be taken away. So I'm understandably a little bit upset about that. I'm understand about what it says about American business. I'm upset about what it appears to say about what Brentwood feels about manufacturing, about whether maybe that's just too dirty for this city. But we sure have been trying. We've been a small business. We've been here for many years, coming up on 30-year anniversary of the founding of the company. We moved to Brentwood. It's a family company. The CEO is a family member of mine. It's my mother. And so I'm surprised that all of a sudden sounds like we're in a lot of danger here with this new development, and seems like we just spent $95 million to unblight the area, to do all this flood improvement. It sounds like the numbers are there. It sounds like we have improved it, but suddenly now maybe we need more eminent domain. And I've been told, oh, it's not going to take over the houses to the north of the city, to the north of the road. But commercial businesses, yeah, they're right out. I just don't know where it stops. I don't know if it stops with us. I don't know if it stops when it hits the church. I don't know what's going to be eminent domain next. And I'm really not sure how this is going to make us, as a city, in a better tax position. You know, the proposal calls for 90% tax abatement, property tax, for 10 years. And somehow that's going to save us money. Well, our building spent $107,000 in taxes, which we pay. And that was in 1 year. So to me, that just doesn't seem like good business. And I hope that there's at least some consideration before this project gets swept through committee and approved. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Jeremy King, and I own the Watering Bowl at 2615 South Hanley Road. I talked with the mayor last week about this topic, and I've emailed all of you. I'm not sure how many of you have seen it yet, but I kind of want to echo some of the comments of a previous speaker about Black Creek. A lot of what we heard about today was Deer Creek focused, and I think you guys are to be commended for what you're doing down there. Obviously, based on the presentation, it had a significant impact. Unfortunately, for those of us on the north side of Manchester, that doesn't do us any good given the current condition of Black Creek. About 150 yards north of Manchester, there are 3 old bridge abutments. From what I was told, was from a railroad bridge that was removed, years and years ago. And up from those is a massive accumulation of full-size down trees and brush and concrete and rocks and everything you can imagine for probably a 60-foot span, completely blocking off Black Creek. And while I understand the events that we are discussing here tonight are once in a century, once in 1,000 years, et cetera, the current condition of the creek leaves it as such that even a moderate to heavy rain is going to flood us out again. And what you're doing on the south side of Manchester and with Deer Creek isn't going to help us because the water cannot get through. From what I see, it is not a major ask to get what is in there cleared out. In conversations I've had with Public Works and others, it sounds like MSD is trying to shirk that responsibility to the private landowner who happens to have the misfortune of owning the property where the trees stop flowing downstream. That doesn't seem right to me, considering this is a community problem that's affecting dozens of businesses around me and significantly more all the way up into the industrial court where that business is. So while I understand that removing this debris will not end our problem, it will significantly reduce the flooding that will happen from a moderate to heavy rain now. If that stuff is not removed, 2 of my neighbors have already said they're not reopening after the recent floods, and I'm having a hard time pulling the trigger on the significant expense necessary. My entire business is gutted up to 4 feet tall because that's how tall the water was inside of my building when we had to evacuate 42 dogs and a human by boat. So as we are now putting it back together, and every time a rain comes, I have to worry about whether we are going to find ourselves in that same position again. And I understand there's nothing we can do about a 1,000-year flood, but there's absolutely something we can do to try to mitigate the risk that currently exists behind our building that even a moderate rain will put us all in harm's way. So I wanted to make sure that everyone here was aware of that. It's a couple days worth of work, some heavy equipment, some chainsaws. It's not a big ask, guys. And a lot of businesses and a lot of people are going to be left in harm's way until something is done about it.
Thank you, Mr. King. Anyone? Mayor Thornton.
I'm Chris Thornton. I live at 9421 Tillis Drive. I came up to say a few things. I've been following the plan closely, and I wanted to share with the Board of Aldermen and Your Honor some things that may have been forgotten. There's only 2 aldermen who have been here since the very beginning of this thing. And so I wanted to kind of to share some of that perspective. And then if Your Honor would give me some time at the end, I'd be happy to try to answer some of the questions to which I actually know the answers. So, but that's up to you. The first thing I want to say is that I would encourage the board and everybody here to remember that if it were not for the work of Mayor Kurtz and Mayor Kelly, none of this would be possible. This project has only been possible due to their hard work, their foresight, their vision. I looked up today on Google and saw a picture of Mayor Kurtz cutting the ribbon at the Target. And that is, in fact, the very type of thing that led to this being a possible thing. So I just want to remind everybody of that. It tends to get lost in the shuffle. But it's a very important thing, if you ask me, because it put us in a very unique position to be able to do these things. The second point I wanted to remind you is that we took an unusual strategy on this project, and I believe the city attorney called it leading with our chin, which is not a recommended boxing technique. But what we did was we went ahead and we spent the money up front to cure the flooding problem or to mitigate the flooding problem. And that's what made this possible. But by doing that, what we did was we spent taxpayer money on something that is essentially development. And so what we said at the time is that we were be very, very stringent about granting incentives for developers to come here. We've done our part. And we don't want to be laying out incentives to developers to do more. Now, I understand that there are some incentives and I trust everybody here's judgment, so I'm not going to recommend one way or the other on these particular incentives. But what I will tell you is the nuts and bolts don't come until the development agreement gets negotiated, and I will tell you, you will be under a great deal of pressure during the negotiation of the development agreement to consider additional incentives, and I would encourage you to remember what we did in this project, which was spend about $35 million of the taxpayers' money to get it in a position where it would be developable. The final thing I want to, the final thing I want to say about the project is that in the beginning, and I know a lot of people here have asked a lot of really good questions, but I will tell you in the very beginning, this thing was just kind of an idea. We wanted to see if it was even physically possible to do it, right? And we considered everything. We considered the Black Creek. We considered the Deer Creek. We considered all of that area along Russell, right? And sir, the bridge at Brentwood, we considered all of that when we took this project on. But the fact of the matter was that the only thing that was physically possible, right, to the city of Brentwood was the Manchester portion of Deer Creek. And I will tell you that if you go and talk to MSD, their plan for the Black Creek along Brentwood is for it to be bought out. So, sir, if you're not able to pull the trigger on your lease, I don't know where you went. but my advice is move, because that's the plan for that area. The plan for your area is exactly the same. What's the plan? MSD's plan for that area is to have it bought out. Yeah, I'm not going to give you the dissertation on that. Look, folks, the point is you solve the problems you can solve. The ones you can't, you deal with. And the problems that we can't solve in this community are all of that stretch of Deer Creek that runs along Russell. There's just nothing to be done about it, right? And all of the Black Creek that runs all the way back up. There's nothing to be done about it. Honest to God. We looked at it upside down, sideways. We assumed an unlimited budget. It's still not doable. So I'm here to tell you from the very beginning, and so to your point, sir, about the question about how can you call this a success? Because it did exactly what we designed it to do. We planned to pull 30 acres out of the floodplain along Manchester Road. That's what we've done.
What about the 4 feet? I'm sorry, sir.
Anyway, so look, my point. I think I'm done. My point is, it's a really unique project. We should remember the people who made it possible for our community. We should not place expectations on it that are beyond what is physically reasonable. And we should definitely remember that we use the taxpayers' money to get to this point, and we should not be throwing additional incentives at people who want to come in and develop now that we've put it in this position. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Hello, my name is Stuart Clark. I live on St. Clair Avenue, and I want to thank Chris for his comments and historical perspective. I worked with Mark Kurtz and Kelly when we did the redevelopment of Brentwood Square, and it was very important to the city that those two projects were completed. I just want to add one thing to what Chris said, and yes, we're getting a beautiful Brentwood Park that's going to be built over the next year. But when we did the redevelopment of Brentwood Square, we did have to give some incentives to do that. And it was very tough at the time because we knew the incentives we were giving were going to take as much as 20 years to pay out, in a sense. Well, it's been 20 years now, and these things are starting to pay out. That's why we have the ability to do this project with Brentwood bound. And Chris is right. All we were trying to do was those acreage and pull them out of the floodplain. So thank you very much for the Jacob's presentation on what happened and did it work up to this point. And that's really encouraging. And I know I was down there looking at the water, and I was down there seeing what part of the park or event center went underwater, and it's looking pretty good. So thank you.
Thank you, Stu. Anyone else?
Good evening. I'm Ellen Mell. I am CEO of Custom Technologies. I'm his mother. We are at 8255 Brentwood Industrial. And I want to tell you that I speak tonight on many angles, okay? I happen to be, by training, by education, I'm a physicist. I work with a lot of engineers. I teach a class at WashU with regard to intellectual property and entrepreneurship. I also have an MBA, okay? So I've seen this happen. This project I've watched for 3 years, wearing all those different hats, okay? I've watched the wonderful choices that you guys have made to try to solve a problem in Brentwood. I've lived here and I've worked here and I've brought my business here. I've been here nearly 20 years on purpose, okay? I love Brentwood. 3 years ago, approximately, I watched our businesses front and center to what's been going on. The physicist in me said, what are they going to do, and what are they doing, and how are they doing it? We questioned it, we laughed. Are they making sense, are they not? It's been a process where we've watched what's been going on. And I was excited when I first saw Brentwood Bound 3 years ago. I was incredibly excited. I thought this needs to happen. It's clearly a problem. It's a mess. Every time it floods, we have a lot of businesses that are impacted. But quite frankly, I want to explain our position tonight that 3 years ago, more or less, when we saw the plan, I looked at it and said, you know what, our business is not going to be taken. We felt a reliance and a feeling that we were going to be part of the future of Brentwood, and we dug in. I have been working to build a business that manufactures here in the United States. I've been doing that passionately for 25 years. It is concerning to me, as my son said, that I feel that the decisions that are making about what needs to be redeveloped in this area are questioning the need for manufacturing, questioning the need for some of the companies that are already there. I know a lot of these people. Rudy, I know Rudy. I take my car to Rudy. I have become a part of this community, right? We all work together, and I think that Rudy probably has, just like we have, borne with excitement and frustration for 3 years the mess that this has caused, right? It's been a mess to be down there. And we've been excited and hopeful and looking forward to the result. And I have to tell you that it feels concerning that the choice would be made, as my son said, do we need the microbrewery or do we need the car guy and the person who manufactures and welds things when they're broken and trains new engineers? We support STEM education. I don't know if you guys know what we do, but I hope you would, okay? Does Brentwood need us or do they need something else? And I ask you to not dismiss the collective out of hand tonight. I think we can do a pretty good job of cleaning up our place when you guys get done doing your part. And we would like to be a part of Brentwood. I would like to manufacture for the United States of America right here in Brentwood. I think that's important. And I hope we get the chance to do it. I hope we're not kicked out. Moving our place is going to be a nightmare. Come see us. You'll know what I mean. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Laura Gordon. I'm a mom. I live at 2616 Melvin. So obviously, my neighborhood looks like something out of Mad Max right now, and it has for a while. We moved here during the pandemic. I've lived all over the country, and all over the country you can find the same basic development. A brewery, a yoga studio, and a high-rise. And when I came to Brentwood, it was different and it was special. There is like Custom Country Glass where I bought the mirror for my basement. They've got RPM where I take my car for my business. We have small businesses that you don't see anywhere in America, where you don't, everywhere we've flattened it out. We've Walmarted every other development. And so when I came here, it was special because it was different. Now, as a family member, as someone who bought into this community, I was excited because like I live near an abandoned Sonic, which is not beautiful. But I was really hopeful for what you guys were going to bring. When I saw this come out and all it is eminent domain, removing the businesses that I've come to love. I love Fort Taco. I love it, right? And this is going to replace that. And these are not services that will serve me as a family in Brentwood. I don't need another brewery in St. Louis. I certainly don't need 600 new families moving, using our schools, using our systems. I don't need a lot of young millennials to come into our community and not engage, right? Because I want to be involved in this community. I want to engage. And the development they're bringing in, it is throwing out the people who've already stayed here and who have invested in it and replacing with people who aren't going to have the same values and who aren't going to offer the same diversity to our communities. So I came here, I guess, to just voice my deep concern. I think a lot of my community members in the Melvin area, like we are trapped. We only exit to Manchester. So this will add considerable congestion, will make it harder for me to get in and out. There are so many new houses going into our neighborhood. And to have that whole area suddenly become just a whole bunch of businesses, 600 new family units in apartment buildings, I am deeply concerned about how this is going to impact Manchester, but also how little it's actually going to do for us, the residents who are paying our taxes now. This seems like something for people outside of Brentwood, not for the people who already live here, who bring our taxes here, and who value it. So, thank you.
Thank you.
How you guys doing? My name is Rob Townsend. I run Sideline Bar at 8510 Manchester Road in the Brentwood Center. The construction has been very trying for us, specifically since, you know, everybody to the east has a really hard time getting to us. I've endured this with the hope that I would be part of the future, but recently I've learned apparently you plan on, you know, buying out our property. So I don't see anybody else here from our Brentwood Center, but there's several other small businesses there. I believe small businesses are very important to a community. You only have so many Walmarts and, you know, big corporate things, you know. It seems to serve the rich only and not the middle class. So I'm very concerned that I've learned this. We've been here, Sideline Bar's been there since 1989. Like, it's been there a long time. Been part of the community for a long time, and we got a lot of regulars that would be sad to see us go. And I'm sure the same goes for the other businesses in the center. So I would hope that you would consider keeping some of the small businesses around, and along with the new, you know, development, which, again, I look forward to, you know, enjoying the benefit of that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Townsend.
Your Honor, Aldermen, thank you for having me tonight. My name is Nicholas Heisman. I also work at 8255 Brentwood Industrial Drive. I also live on the other side of Deer Creek and Webster Groves off of Tuxedo Boulevard. I view myself as a neighbor of Brentwood living in Webster. I spend my days driving back through our highways, visiting our businesses. I don't vote in your municipality, but I work here, I live here. I almost lived here. I love it here. I'm so happy that, you know, we're working on the flood situation. It's been a problem working in the industrial park. I generally walk along the railroad tracks, trespassing, don't arrest me, to go take photos, to see what's going on with, you know, our dumpster as it floats down Deer Creek and ends up in the back of, whether it's Lockwood's docks or over down, it once got all the way over to Frederick Roofing, and that was fun to wheel back over to the shop. I was very enthusiastic to see that on the old Tesson Farm site, the construction of the Navigate building there on the side of the road, and saw that, yes, this is working. The flood has been solved. People are moving in. We're building new buildings. This is exciting. I question the movement right now of the redevelopment board to push forward for a large, massive plan, effectively giving 1 mile of our main thoroughfare to a single company, when there's not been enough time for the free market to go in and invest in these same instances, these same structures, and build new businesses as is organically needed by the community. I would caution to look up the street Brentwood to the boulevard across the street from the Galleria, which has had a phase 2 coming soon sign for about as long as I can remember. I think they just put up a new one last week saying it's coming in 2024. You look at the neighboring buildings to that to see that they're beyond blighted than where they were when that project started, because no one wants to invest in something that's slated for demolition. And I question, as this long multi-year project proceeds, what happens to the neighboring businesses that we've already deemed to either be awesome or be an empty lot, or be where our friends and family used to work, as they may fall into further disrepair or get neglected now because, as the former mayor pointed out, maybe the businesses should just move. What does that do then? There might not be anything left to be bound, to be flooded, to have a brewery or to have people work at. And I think that's a sad state of our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Joe Plitzy. I live in Brentwood. I also lease a building in Brentwood, and I was about to use a Brentwood general contractor to fix up some of the buildings that you are going to demolish. And I was going to ask you, what should I do with the money that I already spent for an architect that I can't get back, that I barely had to begin with, for a business that I'm trying to get off the ground? Should I leave? Anybody? I know it's not question and answer, but I'm a young business person. What would you like me to do? Nobody? Thank you.
John Lowe here. Technically now I live in Rock Hill. But anyway, thank you all very much. For many years, and Chris and everyone from the old days did so much good. And it's a great flood mitigation. And my dad said when the Target project happened, it's I guess he warned his he developed cities and communities typically give away the store, and that's the only caution. And I haven't looked at the numbers, and I will. But thanks again. You guys have done a great job so far. But I'm with some of the other folks who have a bigger stake. I got a lot of family in Brentwood, but it seems too much too fast, and we got other. It's a plum. This is one of the plum projects in North America. Anybody properly presented, I used to work in financials, they'll come after this deal. We don't have to give away anything.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mike?
Mike Horton, 2527 Kentland Boulevard. Two things. I would love to see these proposals turned into a 3D model that we could see, put it up maybe in the rec center area, so it's easier to visualize and actually have them labeled as to what's going where. Just sit up and watch. And to go with that, I'd love to see a model of what's already there, because it would really help all of us when we're looking at these things. When they say, hey, let's put in a brew pub, well, where are you putting that brew pub? What are you displacing? Be a very easy visual representation and make it very easy for us to understand. At the risk of getting run out of here on a rail, I'm not against the redevelopment in general. The issue that I have is, and I was talking to my wife last night, and she brought this up, and we decided I was going to say it because I think it makes a good point, that you have a lot of businesses that are very successful businesses. We got the fly fishing place, RPM, you know, who else has been? Everybody's been telling us about their businesses, and these are successful businesses. And all we're doing with this plan is turning around and taking people who, and this is the point my wife made, that have been here for years. They've supported Brentwood. They've decided to invest their money in Brentwood. They've invested their time in Brentwood. They've dealt with the flooding. They've dealt with the pandemic. And these places are still here and still fighting to stay here. And they're successful. Why would we take out the fly fishing guy and his business to put something else in there? I don't fly fish. I'll never walk into the store, but that's fine with me. He's got a successful business. Other people like it. They come here, they spend money. We get taxes for that, and that's great. But as we move forward, and I believe that it will move forward with the development, the developer, Green Street, and the Board of Aldermen and anybody else in the city need to be paying attention to, let's not just say we're going to drop a brew pub, we're going to drop a swim up pool bar that I heard at one point. You know, I mean, I'm not against it per se. I won't go there, but why rip out a successful business to drop in something that has no history here? And to be honest, we don't know if it'll work. You know, so moving forward, please have Green Street and again the city and the folks who work for the city and the planning and developing and all these, please work very hard to make those decisions about what is actually going to be the end part of this development. Let's make it the folks who incorporate those businesses. Let's keep them here. Let's not throw them out. Improve the whole thing. Like I said, I'm not necessarily against it, but I think it could be worked better than just pulling everybody out and tossing them in the street. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
My name is Vanessa Tidwell. I live at 2626 Melvin. I was a huge supporter of Brentwood Bound. We have a lot of blight with empty lots along Manchester that I have to drive by every day. And I was so thrilled that we were going to fix this flooding problem and be able to put active businesses in those spots. But I cannot support using eminent domain to remove functional businesses that are part of our community. Even if I don't go to Fort Taco, I don't use RPM, but they are good businesses and there's no reason to tear them out to put in some businesses just because a developer thinks that they're a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Karen Smith on Harrison. I don't know if these meetings are not going to be on with a Zoom meeting anymore, but I didn't see a link tonight, so I'm here in person. It's been a couple of years. Just have a couple of points to make. First of all, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record because you've all heard some of these same things from me for years. But regarding the flooding that we've had, and I know the presentation that the woman did from MSD was very informative, but there are conversations out there going on right now that a lot of the modeling that we do to mitigate flooding currently are built on the way our environment used to be and not the environment of the future. So just want to make us aware of that we may need to think about some things differently. I think what we're doing is going to help, but I don't know if it's going to solve our problems totally for the future. I think we're going to see more rain events like what we've seen over the last couple of months or weeks, unfortunately. To that point, also conversations taking place that also look at the fact that we have used eminent domain and we've bought properties to flood mitigate, but then we're turning around and putting structures back in. And that includes the park, the event space. All of that could be used to help those are going to be impervious surfaces. Not only do we have to maintain those buildings after the flood, they're impervious surfaces. And so something to think about is whether we could mitigate how much built structure we put back into this area. I also am not in favor of eminent domain. I never have been, not only just for residential, I also don't believe it should be used for commercial when you don't have to. The project, when it was first brought forward, had three things: Deer Creek flood mitigation, Manchester Road improvement, and Deer Creek Greenway connector. Some development was proposed. I was told that it was just going to be development that would occur when there were some properties that became available as a result of the mitigation effort, that we were not going to be going out after any additional properties. And I was told that you weren't going to be using eminent domain. That was not something that the city favored anymore. So I'm really surprised to hear that we're back on the table. I hope you're going to honor the promise to the community. I agree that these commercial businesses, I don't use a lot of them. I use many of them. I don't use a lot of them. They have been in our community. They've been participants of our community. They've contributed to our community. They've participated in community events. I feel that they should be given the opportunity to continue. My last point, this is a big project, as a couple of people have mentioned earlier. St. Louis has several big projects that have taken place over the years. You've got Centene and Clayton, you have Richmond Heights, the Boulevard, you have Paul McKee up in North City. Big projects are hard to pull off. And so we need to make sure that the city protects itself and make sure that the developments that they're going to bring forward, especially in their phase one, are the strategic developments that we want. And that we also have protect ourselves if you all are going to be giving them any incentives, which of course you know that I'm against that. But if you do give incentives, you want to make sure that we're protected and that you've got clawbacks in there so that you can get back the taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
My name is Dave Chiodini, and I live at 2616 Cecilia. I wanted to talk about what Ms. Smith talked about. We had a extraordinary flood time this past month and a half. That's not going to change. If you look at the West, what's happening in the West of our own country, all kinds of changes environmentally are happening. Today, they came out with a report that we're going to be facing 125-degree heat cycles through the middle part of the south and middle part of our country. The environment is changing dramatically, and yes, I wish the person who spoke first was still here. She's not. She left, the engineer. We're looking, as Ms. Smith said, at a old project. We're not looking into the future to see what possibly could come down the road environmentally. And I think that's really important that we take another look at this, because we're putting in two large structures right along Black Creek that are going to be impervious. That means there's going to be more runoff there until MSD gets its act together and decides to do something with it. Okay? So I'm really concerned about that. That's my major concern. I'm also concerned about the density of the project, especially with the hotels and the apartment buildings. I think that's something I think we really have to take a look at. But I'm mostly concerned about the environmental impact. We may need to take another look at how much more land we need to have in order to prevent what we just experienced, because I don't think this is going to be a 1,000-year flood. I think we better get ready for a couple more.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Amy Stanford, co-owner of Time for Dinner at 8506 Manchester. We have had our business for almost 20 years. We've poured our heart and soul into Time for Dinner. The floods from whatever, 12 years ago, then we had the closure of Highway 40, we had the pandemic, now we have food prices skyrocketing, the construction, the other flood. And we rallied time and time and time again. We love our business, we love where we are, and when we learned that there was a possibility that we could lose our business to eminent domain, it breaks our heart. And I'm not going to go on and on, but I'm with all of the people that are in the same boat as we are, because we've provided a great service to the community, and we hope that that will be recognized in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Stanford.
Hi, my name is Liz Beisch. I own 8500 Manchester and 8502 to 8518 Manchester. I didn't plan on saying anything tonight because frankly, my lawyer told me no matter what I say, this is a done deal. But I have two of my tenants here tonight, so I have to say their heart is broken, my heart is broken. Our space is fully occupied. We have had businesses there, a dog grooming business, the bar, Time for Dinner, multiple businesses there that have been there 20 plus years. They have been part of the community for 20 years. We have been partners for 20 years. Through floods, through COVID. I'm not sure that, I have nothing against developers, but I'm not sure that they will have the same passion for their tenants and for your community. And the gentleman that spoke about the money he spent, I'm glad that I'm here to hear that I'm not the only one that was caught off guard by this whole thing. I had no idea this Brentwood Bound was about any of this. And I guess as a property owner, the way I was supposed to find out was some ad in a newspaper. I don't even know how you communicated this to us. It's devastating to us. And I have, because I wanted to partner with my tenants through this mess, I've painted our buildings, I put on new facades on the building, I put new sidewalks. We are in this together to get through till guess what? The flood mitigation's over with, the road construction's over with, and guess what happens then? I have to sell my property, and lucky you get a property that's out of a floodplain, and the roads are done, and beautiful sidewalks. And what's gonna happen to the small businesses? Small businesses can't close for 2 years while they're building what they're building, let alone if they can afford what you're offering them. So again, it doesn't matter what I say apparently, because I'm sure you've dotted every I and crossed every T. But I want you to know how it feels to have been an owner for this long in Brentwood, and I just want to let you know that what our tenants are going through is breaking our hearts also. So thank you.
I'm Fran Horvath. I live at 17 York Hills. And I want to first thank all the business people that have been speaking this evening. I have no dog in this fight in terms of Manchester Road, but I agree with you. And I think the city of Warmth should not turn a cold shoulder toward people who have supported it all these years. Secondly, there's something that hasn't been discussed. We tend to do projects out of context. I think this is a generic proposal. It doesn't say anything to me. It doesn't make me want to go there, live there, nothing. It's the same proposal that I've seen over and over again in other parts. But there is no mention either in the RFP or in the proposal about how you're going to get there. There's a mention that we're close to highways. But if you have traveled Hanley, Brentwood, McKnight, that little 5-minute trip isn't a 5-minute trip. And there's nothing in here and nothing in the RFP that says that has to be addressed. Folks, that has got to be addressed. Don't wait until someone is killed trying to get out of a subdivision on McKnight Road. There are car carriers going down McKnight Road. That's not acceptable. So I'm saying before you do anything else, you've taken care of the flooding, maybe, till you start building there again. Take care of the traffic problem. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yep.
I have been doing a lot. First of all, my name is Joyce Langeth. I live at 2619 Cecilia. I have been listening a lot, hearing a lot of emotions, which you're going to hear from me also. But I totally agree about the traffic issue. But my concern is, are you listening to the people who voted for you? Are you listening to us? We do not want to approve that density that you are planning. My hope for Brentwood Bound was it would be family-oriented, and I think the park is that way, but the development is not. It brings in the younger group that aren't going to stay in Brentwood because they can't afford it, and I know that's part of your idea, and I'm looking at myself as a senior citizen. Do I want to live in age-restricted housing? Not in a two-bedroom apartment that takes my whole Social Security check? No. So think about who votes for you, and think about what you really want to do, because you're there by the grace of your voters, not by anybody else who's going to be building there, okay?
My name is Chad Dykes. I'm with Particle Dynamics at 2629, 2635 South Hanley Road. We have a manufacturing facility there. We make pharmaceuticals. We make nutraceuticals. Very hard to move such an environment. We've been flooded 3 times by Black Creek. In this most recent event, we saw that was a big event, so I get that. But we were also here, we've been here since '73. So we've been here for almost as long as I've been alive. And this is the first time it got into the building to the height that it did. So looking at the events, there was another event when ICE happened. It was a similar quantity. Something's different, right? And so it did get into the building then, but it didn't get high into the building. We had 14 inches of water, and like the fellow from the watering bowl, you know, we had to cut out all the sheetrock. You know, I've got empty walls right now. I've got a shut down facility. And it really is disheartening that we've been here this long, and it'll be very, very difficult to move our facilities somewhere else. And not to mention that, you know, we've been here a long time. We're dedicated to here. But it's very, very difficult to move. And so, and my investors are very worried about the next one, right? Because 3 in a row, you know, every time it rains, my investors are worried because we have to pay to reestablish it. The next rain, we'll have to do it again, right? So we back up to Black Creek. You know, I certainly hope something out of this new project or clearing out the creek or something can bring us back to where we were before. I mean, we had a big flood in 2008 and we didn't have to shut down the facility. I've been shut down since the 26th, and we'll be shut down for the next several weeks while I rebuild the plant. And what I heard from the ex-mayor, you know, I'm not from around here, so, but if you have property there, get out. That is not easy for us to do. So I will ask that we do something in immediate sense to clear out the massive debris that is in Black Creek, to give us a few more inches before it comes up into the building again. And then somehow in this project, maybe we can mitigate Black Creek. You know, we just can't afford to continue to have these. And if the environment's doing like some were suggesting, then we'll be back here again in a couple of years and 3 years and whatever. And we don't want to move out of Brentwood, but we can't continue to operate a pharmaceutical facility in a place that floods. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I'm Judy Chiodini at 2616 Cecilia. My grandfather owned Englehart's Tavern at 8212 Manchester when Manchester was just a dirt road. I've lived through many of the floods. because I lived almost my whole life in Brentwood. I lost my goats when I was 8 years old to the floods, my rabbits, everything. I've seen a lot of changes. I love Brentwood. I am with you on development. It needs to be done. I feel for these businesses. This is a little too much for me. It's not, I was on the Brentwood Bound Committee. This is not what I envisioned either at the time. You know, we were told possibly a brewery, probably movies, a movie house, restaurants, small shops and such. Never did I think you would be replacing. But my biggest concern is the neighborhood north of Manchester, Cecilia, Lewis, Salem, Melvin. We will be kind of landlocked. It would be horrible to be able to get out on Manchester. If you have 500 more units in there of people living 2 cars each, we're talking a lot of traffic, a lot of traffic. I figured Cecilia would not be able to be a neighborhood street anymore. It will be a go-between for people to be able to cut through. I mean, even when they had to close Manchester, look at all the upheaval there was and the monthly meetings we had with the police and such about the traffic going through our neighborhood. I can't imagine what this would bring to us. So just please keep that in mind. I believe that we should develop Manchester. Possibly the money should go to the new businesses that are there. You know, maybe tax incentives to the businesses that are there. That was suggested by my daughter and such. But I think this looks too good to be true. I mean, I'm excited about it, but I'm also cautious. And that's what I hope you guys are too. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Chiodini. Anyone else? There is another time for public comment if you don't want to speak, say anything now. At the end of the meeting, there will be an opportunity as well. So seeing none, we're going to move on. Before we do, I just want to thank everyone who took time to show up tonight. You know, you may not think so, but I, along with everybody on the board, are huge advocates of transparency. We have done everything we can since we've been elected to be as transparent as we can, whether it's with Brentwood Bound, whether it's with the applicant that's in front of the board tonight, or anything related to Brentwood. And we encourage people to come down and let us know what they think. It's a lot easier to stay home, get on your computer or your cell phone or your iPad and blast away on social media. But it takes a lot more courage to do what you did tonight. So I appreciate your time to come down here and for us to hear what you had to say. So with that, we're going to move on to mayor and alderman reports. First up is the mayor. We've got a couple of things. One is, the first thing is to appoint someone finally to the communications committee. And you all have Mr. Thomas's CV or his volunteer interest form. That's Blaine Thomas. And so I'm asking for a motion to approve the appointment of him to the, and Alderman Plufka, I'm sorry, to the Communications Committee.
Thank you. So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on those 2 appointments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, Jack. Motion carries. Next up under mayor's report, and I'll try to keep it short in light of the number of comments we had. Just to kind of follow up on the flooding events, and this is primarily for the residents and for the board who may not know this. Keep in mind that because of the flood mitigation program of Brentwood Bound, not only have we seen actual data that it did achieve the goal that we wanted it to achieve, there was another goal that sometimes we don't remember, and that was public safety. You know, it was flood mitigation, but it was also to try and help with the public safety issue. Historically, when we'd have these types of flood events, we had residential structures down there that would have to flood. We'd have a lot of businesses that would flood. And Chief Cottrell could get up here and tell us about the number of instances our Swiftwater Rescue Team had to go down there and evacuate businesses, had to evacuate residences. And because of our efforts with the flood mitigation, there were at least 23 fewer buildings that had to be searched by our fire department and our police department. There was an apartment building that we didn't have to worry about having to evacuate, which absolutely would have been flooded if it was still there. So that is another benefit of this flood mitigation, and I just wanted to remind everybody of that. You know, the steps, or what we ask our first responders to do on a regular basis is a lot. But we really do get to see it when we have these types of events that we saw on July 26th, 28th, and August 3rd, and August 4th. I am not exaggerating when I say, in a lot of instances, they put their life on the line to help people. They put their life on the line to help a bunch of dogs in Watering Bowl, in Bowser House. That's what our firemen did. And other fire departments did that as well. We shouldn't take that lightly. And our police department, the same thing. We asked for them to do a lot of work in helping out during those events, as did our public works department. So, you know, if you see these folks, tell them thank you, and we do appreciate all that they've done. One last thing about the flooding events, and that is, I think there's some misunderstanding as to what happened with these events. You know, I've seen some people talk about what flooded and what didn't flood, and I just want the board to know, and the residents to know, that the new event lawn pavilion did not flood. The new parking lot did not flood. The event lawn itself, which is designed to accommodate food trucks with special events, did not flood. The location for the destination playground did not flood. Now, we have a lot of damage that has resulted from that, and you know, the Brentwood Sports Complex, as you know, there's a substantial amount of damage to the fences, to one of the backstops, and I believe, if Eric's here, yeah, I believe they started replacing some of the fences or tearing down some of the fences this week, and they're still trying to figure out the best way to address all the silt and the rocks and the other debris that's left on the Brentwood Sports Complex, or formerly known as Brentwood Park. And they're still trying to, I don't know, Alderman Weggie, have they decided yet? Did you take up the issue of Brentwood Days?
No, it's going to be see how it goes. I mean, there's some optimism there, but there's a lot of things that have to happen to make that. So I think we'll know more in the next couple weeks. Again,
we're not planning on canceling Brentwood Days, just trying to decide whether or not to hold it down there in the Brentwood Sports Complex. Oak Tree Park, I believe the surface to the playground suffered damage, and that's going to need to be replaced because of and that's from Black Creek. The trails, our trails over on that side were also impassable. I went down there, I don't remember if it was after the 28th or the August 3rd and 4th event on a Saturday, and you just couldn't walk on the trails. There was that much mud, and but I did see that one of our residents actually got out there and shoveled it off by himself or herself, whoever it was. But then our Parks Department went out there and cleaned up the trails. After the event of the 28th, I was down on the bridge on Litzinger talking to some of the residents that evening to see how they were doing. And so I had a chance to talk to the folks about how bad it was on Eulalie, how much water there was on the street. And we heard some cracking and some popping sounds. And we saw a couple of trees move, and so we walked over there to investigate it, and we found that part of Lee Wynn's trail was collapsing and sliding into Black Creek. And so I called the police, and we blocked it off as best we could on that Thursday night. But again, Eric's looking into that along with our Director of Public Works to see what can be done about restoring that and putting it back to its original condition. We know the dog park took a hit, again, because of Black Creek. All these things are because of Black Creek. The dog park, we need a new surface, and I believe that's going in maybe tomorrow. Yes, I'm getting a yes by Eric. But in general, we are still assessing a lot of the damage that was a result of the flood, and it's going to take a long time to restore it. But we'll have more information at the next meeting. So with that, Alderman Plufka.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was struck by a number of comments during the public comment section, but the one I want to respond to, I think the woman actually left. She was a business owner, and she was rather strident, and she had come up, and I think her opening comment was, I talked to my lawyer, and this is a done deal, so I don't even know why I'm complaining. It's not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, and you can believe me or not, it's not a done deal. Tonight's resolution is only whether or not to work with Green Street to try to come up with an agreement between now and June 30th of next year. That's it. There has been no discussion of the use of eminent domain, nor the city's ability to transfer that ability to any developer, let alone this developer. There has been no discussion about whether or not we're going to give them any of the financial incentives they have asked for. The former mayor's comments were well said, and other people's were well said. We've done the heavy lifting here. We've done the infrastructure work, and we do not need to be handing out tax incentives to developers where in other situations we would be relying on their money and investment to provide sidewalks and lighting and some of those things that we would rely upon. Keeping businesses in the area is very well said. The people that made those comments, I think that's absolutely right. And one of our challenges is going to be that whether it's this developer or whether it's another developer, is to make them mindful of the fact that we have a thriving business community in this city, and it will be nice to see how much of it we can retain while still redeveloping that corridor. The traffic implications will be studied, absolutely will be studied, both at the planning and zoning stage and at the Board of Aldermen stage. You will see detailed traffic analysis of each individual building as it comes before us. This is not going to be approved, and then all of a sudden they're going to start breaking ground tomorrow on phases 1 through 4 of the 17 buildings they're proposing. Each and every one of those buildings comes to the Planning and Zoning Board and then comes to us. There will be a full vetting done at all of those times, and I welcome you to be with us throughout that entire process. Last but not least, this is not tied to Brentwood Bound. You notice in the resolution there is no mention of the word Brentwood Bound. Karen was absolutely right. Brentwood Bound was designed to give us access to the GRG, to mitigate floodwater, and to give us a park and trail system, period. And that's the only reason we used eminent domain in any of those instances, because we were after those purposes. To give eminent domain power to a developer for the redevelopment of retail businesses is an entirely different animal. And I understand that, and I believe my colleagues understand that as well. And I'm frustrated because I have tried very hard over the last couple of years to talk to my neighbors and to talk to anybody who will listen about this development and how fantastic the potential is for this. And when I hear comments tonight that say things like, well, you've already decided you're just going to give away the store and you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and people cheer because, Brentwood doesn't know what it's doing or they're doing the wrong thing. You folks don't know the first thing about what Brentwood is trying to do here, because if you did, you'd be applauding the efforts of this board and of the 353 Corporation and of the Planning and Zoning Board, who has taken a very pragmatic approach throughout this process, and we will continue to do so. So I want to all the people that made the comments, a lot of them were spot on, but they were said with the idea that we hadn't thought of them already. We have, and we are dealing with them. And we are going to, and I'm telling you, from my perspective, I am going to work to make sure that those things happen. And if we're able to strike a deal with Green Street, so much the better by June 30th. But if we're not, the resolution tonight says we move on to something else. It doesn't, the financial success of Brentwood Bound does not depend upon the redevelopment of Manchester Corridor. We thought long and hard about how we were going to finance the $90+ million it took to move all that earth and to do all the things that we decided to do. And in issuing the COPs, the 2 sets of COPs in 2 successive years, we knew what debt we were going to have to deal with. And Chris is exactly right when he says we should give a big thanks to some of our former mayors because they put us in the financial position to be able to afford to service $90 million of debt. Without any additional dollar of development, we can finance this debt to its conclusion, okay? You helped us with that with a half-cent sales tax, okay? That's part of it. But the rest of it is Bola and her staff has done an excellent job of managing this city through COVID, where other cities have reduced services, cutting back on police, cutting back on services. Brentwood is not one of those cities because we have great management in place. And frankly, because we have a board and a Ways and Means Committee that saw this stuff coming and planned for it. So I want to thank you for your comments, and I'm sorry I'm a little strident here myself, but it's heartfelt. I love this city. I love this community. I love Brentwood Bound, and I'll be damned if anything, any project, Green Street or otherwise, is going to derail any of that. It's going to happen over my dead body. So I want to just thank you for your comments, but make sure you are aware of the fact that we've been dealing with what you've been talking about tonight for a long time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Alderman Plufka. Alderwoman Tice.
After
Sorry.
that eloquent.
Good luck following that.
Yeah,
sorry.
I'll be shorter. I would really like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. This really does help with the process. Most of the time, there's no one here other than staff, so it's really great to see people here and care and talk with so much passion about the city that I know I love as well. To reiterate the mayor, thank you to the first responders and the Parks and Rec and Public Works staff that worked so hard during these storms. We talked a lot about what was flooded, but there are a lot of people who are helping our city get back. And finally, we have a Ward 1 meeting on September the 13th at 6:30 p.m. at the Rec Center.
Thank you. And I would just encourage people to show up at these ward meetings. I know it can be a little frustrating for people who haven't been here before and they're taken aback that it's not an opportunity to have a question and answer session. If we did that at one of these meetings, first of all, the code doesn't permit it. And secondly, if we did, we'd be here till 2 or 3 in the morning. This is simply a way for us to conduct the business that we are required to conduct by the code. And the ward meetings are a great opportunity for you to ask questions. And I would encourage you to reach out to the aldermen for your areas. Even if you aren't a resident, you can talk to those aldermen, specifically Ward 3, because that's what we're talking about, Alderman Lockmuller and Alderman Gould. Give them a call, email them, and see if you can meet with them or show up at the Ward 3 meetings, and I know they will talk to you. Alderwoman Sims.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I also echo the sentiment here tonight. I thank everyone for coming to this meeting and speaking. We are many, many, many steps away from anyone sticking a shovel in the ground on any project that's been discussed here tonight. So I hope you'll come to the meetings. I hope you'll come to planning and zoning. I hope you'll come to these board meetings so that we have your input and we carefully consider proposals going forward. I genuinely hope that we have as many people in the audience tonight a year from now. So thank you very much for being here this evening. I also would like to thank the first responders. I think you did an absolutely wonderful job during a very harrowing and difficult time, so we're very grateful for your efforts. The August Ways and Means Committee meeting is taking place tomorrow night here at 5:30, and that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Weggie.
So I'd like to thank Eric and staff. So we had our Public Works meeting, and we did a special thing. We took a field trip down to Brentwood Sports Complex, really kind of ascertained what was going on there. There's significant damage, fences that are down, and really taking an eye with what Brentwood Days would look like. I will also say there's a mystery. There's 1,000 golf balls in the outfield of one of the ball fields that we can't quite figure out how they came from. So that might be a game we play at Brentwood Days. But anyway, so we're going to wait and see, how the ground is drying out. See if we can mitigate some of those safety concerns in terms of, we've got a lot of kids running around. So we're kind of in a day by day right now, but, I believe there is optimism that we will be able to have Brentwood Days in the capacity that we normally do there might be some tweaks. So thanks, Eric, and your staff and everybody for working on that. Also, I've called a special Public Works Committee meeting. I know we're still working on the date, and I've invited the entire board to come. So we got the first bids on the destination playground. That is a key component of Brentwood Bound, and that was the highest rated thing in our survey. And just to be frank, those bids came in quite high. And instead of us talking about it at Public Works and trying to make a recommendation, it is somewhat time sensitive. And so we wanted to bring the whole board together because we are going to have to make some tough decisions or some bold action on this. So we are still working to schedule that, but it looks like a couple dates we're still trying to figure out at the end of August, and that would all be open to the public as well. And then last thing is just September 7th, we will be having a Ward 2 meeting at 6 p.m. in the rec center, and we'll be publicizing that as we get a little bit closer to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Lockmuller.
I too would like to thank everybody that came out here and gave great comments. I got 3 pages of it here. But you need to come to Jeff, and we have ward meetings every other month, and let's come and let's talk about these things. I'd also like to thank Bola for all the work she's done lately with this flooding. I mean, before that it's COVID, then it's flooding. I guess now it's locusts, maybe next week. But the staff that she's assembled, the first responders, the Parks Department, the Public Works, they've got a lot of work still ahead of them. But I'd also like to thank all the municipalities that came to our aid, mutual aid, that came from around the city. I believe, Ronnie, we had a crew all the way from Cape Girardeau to come up here and help us during the flooding. So I'd like to extend a thanks to all those guys too. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Gould.
Yes, thank you for coming, everybody. Seriously, hearing from citizens and business owners is critical. It's one of the things that I ran on, is trying to get more people engaged. So seeing a room full of people engaged is encouraging to me that whatever gets developed along Manchester Road will be a community-led development. So I thank you for coming and voicing that. I love Alderman Plefka, so I won't even go into, he had a lot of good comments, so I'll just say what he said. As far as ward meetings, we do have our next Ward 3 meeting in September 27th at 7 o'clock, and we always hold them at the Recplex over there. So please join us.
Thank you. Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes, I'd like to echo what everyone else has said without repeating it all again. There have been thanks for many different things to the people, to the workers. Thank you for coming out, and please continue to do so.
Thank you. Alderman Shelton.
I'll be short and echo what everyone else said. And in addition to that, I wanted to kind of tag on to that, just kind of a note of recognition and thanks to the Brentwood Forest Board. They've noticed all the hard work that our city staff has been putting in and tried to come up with an idea of a gesture. And so in working with Bola and Jason, we were able to offer them some opportunities to come and use the Brentwood Forest Pool for them and their families. So I want to just give some special recognition and show that, you know, sometimes we think that a lot of the work goes unnoticed, but people are always watching, and we do have some of the best staff in town. So thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to a city administrator report. We have 4 items. The first is a presentation by Kerb, Eck, and Breckel.
They are not present, Mayor Dimmitt, and the reason why they're not present is because we have such an awesome report.
Oh.
They feel I can deliver that to the board. So Kerb, Eckel, and Breckel, they're the audit firm on record, retained to perform an independent oversight and verification services of all the expenditures of the 2018-2019 series Certificate of Participation for the Brentwood Bound project. They have been tasked with reviewing the city's financial policies and procedures and ensuring that the city staff is following all those procedures. So for the Series 2018 Certificate of Participation, they conducted 3 tests. The first one was to compare invoices paid to sign contracts with various consultants approved by the Board of Aldermen, examine invoices to determine if City of Brentwood city policies and internal controls were followed, and lastly, to examine invoices for proper payments allowed by the official statements of the certificate of participation, and they have found no exceptions in all three for both 18 and 19. So that's the report.
Great, thank you. Do we have any questions for BOLA, also known as Kerbeck and Beckel? Nothing? All right, great, thank you. Let's move on to Disaster Recovery Update, the USSB Small Business Association. If you would just come to the podium, please.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Javier Caltenco. I'm a Public Information Officer with the Small Business Administration, Office of Disaster Assistance. We have a presidential declaration here in the county of St. Louis, St. Charles, and the city of St. Louis as well. Due to the severe storms and flooding that happened during July 25th to the 28th. Those who were affected, they can apply for disaster assistance with FEMA and the Small Business Administration. The Small Business Administration offers low-interest federal disaster loans to businesses of all sizes, most private nonprofit organizations, homeowners, and renters. So, fix this. Okay. Hopefully that's better. Yeah. So the first step for the homeowners and renters, is to apply with FEMA. As part of the sequence of delivery, they should be applying with FEMA first, and those individuals may be referred to the Small Business Administration as part of the recovery process. Now, I understand that a lot of people may say, well, you know what, I don't own a business. Why are they sending me to SBA? I don't want a loan. This is part of the recovery process from the federal government. So therefore, we suggest those individuals to apply with the Small Business Administration, because if they do not apply, their recovery will end there. So by applying with the Small Business Administration, they can either, if they qualify for the loan, they can either decide to accept it, or they don't have to accept the loan. Again, as I mentioned, if they apply with SBA and for some reason we cannot approve them, we can always refer them back to FEMA for other needs assistance. So that's very important. That's very important that the message that we want to get to the people as part of the recovery process. They should follow that process. Apply with FEMA. If you get referred to SBA, please apply with the Small Business Administration. Now the businesses, they can qualify up to $2 million to repair or replace property damages. That includes real estate and includes machinery and other things similar to that. Small businesses can also qualify up to $2 million for economic injury. So therefore, if businesses are having a hard time paying their rent, paying electricity, or similar expenses, they can qualify up to $2 million. Now, one of the things that we tell those small businesses is that doesn't mean that you need $2 million. You can, if you qualify for $25,000, you can actually, I'm sorry. I'm trying to remember the word, sorry. Well, you don't have to pay, no, sorry, you don't have to, okay, if I remember, I'll tell you, I'm sorry about that. Yes, so therefore, if you, so homeowners can qualify up to $200,000 to repair or replace their primary residence. Homeowners and renters can qualify up to $40,000 to replace personal property, including vehicles that were damaged in the disaster. Now, other ways that just to tell you a little bit about the loans, for example, homeowners can qualify, the loans, the percentage that we have is 1.67%. Businesses is 2.935%, and nonprofit organizations is 1.875%. We do not have any closing cost. There's no application fee, and there's no prepayment penalties. And the amortization, it can be amortized over 30 years as well. Does that mean that I'm done? Okay. Okay. Now another way that individuals can benefit from the loans is that we also provide mitigation. So individuals who suffer, like say, $100,000 in damages, they can use 20% of those damages. So actually, an additional 20% of those damages towards mitigation. Okay, and in some cases, on a case-per-case basis, individuals can also qualify for relocation purposes and refinancing. That's not going to be everybody, but when they go and apply, we have a disaster recovery center that has been open in Hazelwood Civic Center. That's FEMA and Small Business Administration is there. And we also have a business recovery center that was open today at the Urban League of Metro St. Louis at 1408 North. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce this. It's King's
Highway.
King's Highway. I'm sorry, I apologize for that. Yeah, so it's going to be open. It was open today, both of them. So we actually ask people to apply going into the Business Recovery Center or the Disaster Recovery Center and apply in person, because we have individuals who will help them with the application process, and we want to make sure that everything's filled out correctly in order to avoid delays.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you leave with Janet the locations of these recovery centers?
Yes.
She's the director of our communications, and that way we can post that out on social media, the locations of these places.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up is the City of Brentwood storm update. I think, Eric, you're going to update us on this?
The good news is I'll be quick because the mayor gave most of my report already, so I appreciate that, Mayor. As you said, we're cleaning up a lot of things. We're getting quotes for repairs, and we're trying to get that back as quickly as possible so we can give the board the most up-to-date information as possible. A couple other things is that the insurance company, we've been working with Chubb. We've taken 3 different representatives out on tours already since the flooding, so we hope that they have a decent understanding of what's going on. They're in the process of reviewing the policy and estimating damages, and will be back with us soon. And then FEMA and SEMA, they actually are moving forward, and so the public applicant briefing is tomorrow. So I'll be there getting more information of how we submit all of our damages to FEMA and SEMA. So I'll have more information on that after tomorrow's meeting.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Eric? Okay, thank you. Finally, the last item under the administrative report is the Brentwood Bound update.
Hi, good evening. Craig Schluter with Navigate Building Solutions. I'll be providing the Brentwood Bound financial update, as I'll be providing the Brentwood Bound project status update later this evening. The first category of funding is construction costs. $542,086.04 was spent on construction costs. Next is soft costs. $160,686.16 was spent on design, utility, project management, and legal fees. In addition, utility consulting and material testing was also expenditures in the soft cost category. Going down to categories of funding, the city received a Great Rivers Greenway reimbursement check, so that funds received column was updated. And that's my update.
Great, thanks. Any questions for Craig? Thank you so much, Craig. That brings us down to the consent agenda. Is there a request to remove?
Yeah, I request that item H be pulled off and put in the old business because we have discussed it before.
Okay, we can definitely do that.
Thank you.
Any other changes to the consent agenda? Okay, can we get a motion to approve the consent agenda as amended?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Under old business, we have one item, that's Resolution 1386. This is coming out of Public Works, or Is Dan going to be able, Dan's not in town, right? Oh, Kyle?
Kyle Allen is here to present
Kyle,
that.
come on down.
Good evening.
Are you in a position to present on this?
I'm ready.
If not, you can field questions by Alderman Waggy.
Alderman Waggy, what is the questions?
Oh, I don't have any questions. I mean, the reason, so this did not make it out of committee unanimously. You know, this is a paving bid that we went out and we only received one bid back.
Yeah,
We did bring this forward.
This is our yearly bid for our street projects. The first time we bid, we only got one, or first time we went out for RFP, we went out and got one person showed up, Vernon Jones. We worked with them last year. They were a pleasure to work with. Second time around, you guys asked us to send it back out to RFP. I did. Actually, I solicited, emailed personally every single company that's ever bid on any project that I've had and sent them directly to them. Still, Vernon Jones was the only one to respond.
Great, yeah. And thank you for doing that, Kyle. I mean, so the bid came back with the same amount. We still have one bidder. I mean, my position is just that I know this work needs to be done, but it seems like something we can delay. It is 3.5 times what our budget was, you know, estimated this was going to be. I mean, that's the nature of things. In my mind, you know, this is not us being a steward of our taxpayer money. You know, if we can delay this for a little bit and hope that it gets better. I know hope is not a good management practice. Also, I feel like this, in some ways, is making the situation worse for other people that might be in a tougher spot and needing to get paving, because we're going to pay them a lot of money to do one road going forward. And that's why I was a no vote, and that's the only reason I wanted to pull it off the consent agenda.
Okay, Alderman Plufka.
I just have a question, and maybe for Alderman Weggie, it may be for you, Kyle. Is it just conjecture, the idea that this bid was overbid on the idea that they weren't really interested in getting the work in the first place?
I'm not conjecturing anything. I mean, it's more that we only got one bid, and so we are not getting a competitive pool to pick from.
Right.
It is high, but everything's high right now.
Right.
But it just seems like that one bid is really just kind of sticking in my brain.
Would you wait a whole year?
Personally, I would.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Alderwoman Tice.
So this came out of Public Works 2 months ago, and I voted for it then. And I thought about what Alderman Weggie, this exact point that Alderman Weggie is making about we only had one bid. So at the Board of Aldermen meeting 2 times ago, I offered to send this back for additional bids. And we just heard that there was a personal outreach to every concrete contractor the city's ever worked with, and we still got one bid. I feel like we need to do this work. Some of these streets are in really bad shape. I think 2 months ago we had not done a good job looking at this thoroughly. I think now we have, and I encourage my fellow aldermen to support this.
Anyone else? Then we need a motion to approve Resolution 1386.
So moved.
We have a second. Yes.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 1386. Any further discussion? Seeing none, roll call.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
No.
Alderman Weggie?
No.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
Okay, by a vote of 6-0, motion carries.
6-2.
I mean, 6-2, I'm sorry.
All right.
I'm writing zeros here.
That brings us down to new business. First up is Resolution Number 1382, Green Street Real Estate Ventures, Manchester Road Development Area, a resolution selecting Green Street Real Estate Ventures LLC as preferred developer for redevelopment of an area along Manchester Road between Mary Avenue on the west and Hanley Road on the east, authorizing the execution of a preliminary funding agreement, and authorizing city staff to negotiate a redevelopment agreement for consideration by the Board of Aldermen.
Joel Oliver
The applicant here.
with Green Street.
Good evening.
Hello, Joel.
Take me just a second to get this set up, but I can talk to how I do it. We're thrilled to be here tonight. My name's Joel Oliver, lead the development group at Green Street. There's several of us here tonight. We brought a little smaller group because we thought that it might be a full house with the flood updates, but we have several people listening online. So I think we'll be able to answer any questions we need to. See if this actually works. Does it just turn on? Run it again. Okay. So many of us at Green Street have been in this industry for many decades. And we've done a lot of really great, impactful work in the St. Louis region, but also around the entire country. I live next door just in Webster, so I love doing things close to home. It's really impactful and wonderful. I would commend the city. Not all cities are made equally, if you didn't know that. And the city's been great to work with so far. Commend your efforts to date, the RFP you put together, the thoughtfulness of taking a really insurmountable problem in your community and working with your constituents in a way to be able to find a solution is more than we see happening in a lot of places in the country right now. So I commend that. We don't usually show up when a city issues an RFP and have a lot of the heavy lifting done, which you all did with PGAV as your planning group, the work sessions they had with the community and putting together the initial RFP makes our jobs a little bit easier, honestly, when we have all of that feedback from the community in place and then are able to take our expertise and do what we believe, makes tweaks that improve it. So for full transparency, for listening, what I'm going to present tonight is the exact same copy as our RFP response. There's one typo in it that I will point out that's there, but we wanted to be very transparent with what we are presenting tonight is what is available to the public through the city's website. So there's, I think, 300 pages. So, we'll go quickly through some of it, so please stop me at any point if you want me to elaborate on anything. This is the same presentation that we gave to the 353 Redevelopment Corporation. Good? Okay. By way of some background on Green Street for people in the community that maybe are not familiar with us, in its current version, we've been around since 2008. Green Street is, in my opinion, unique because we are what we call a vertically integrated company, which means we have design in-house, we have an architecture firm, we have development in-house, we have a sister company that does financial incentives largely for other developers, many times WNBE developers who just need a little bit of that expertise. We have construction, so kind of all of those things. More importantly, we specialize in almost every asset class. So that means hotels, apartments, retail, industrial. We don't do single family homes by ourselves, and we don't do like utility grade, like an electrical distribution plant. Otherwise, the things that we're showing you, we believe are unique because we have the ability to actually show up and do those things ourselves, or to partner with other developers if there's a compelling reason to do that. So this slide here is what is on the board on the left. I also have the board on the right. We felt like it was very important to show the full extent of the Brentwood boundary development area in context with Brentwood and Hanley and the new park. It's a little hard to read at this scale. Small, it's a little bit easier when it's large. So on this, it zooms into the actual 23 buildings that we're proposing. Later in this presentation and for the ease of everyone to read, there's a page for every single building that calls out what that building type is and some more details about it, so it's a little bit easier to digest. So we did add these two renderings into the second 353 meeting that we had with the redevelopment agency to try to provide some of the context that the one gentleman actually referenced earlier, which he was spot on. Looking at a flat plan is very difficult for people who do this all day, every day. So what we were attempting to do, and there's one going down each way on Manchester, and this is in the proposal, to give people some context for the size and scale of those buildings, to show that there's no 15-story buildings. And while it is a lot of buildings, if you look at the density of what we're proposing on the overall acreage, we would not actually consider this academically a terribly dense project. Not saying that it's perception-wise for the community, I understand is different, but kind of by standard. What we're going to do now, I'm going to do a little different format for this than we did with the 353 in a little more detail. So for the sake of everybody that is watching this, on page 11 of the proposal, we go through what all of these uses are very detailed. I'm going to leave the picture up if that's okay, and I'll talk you through what the buildings are, just so people know what they are. So starting with the orange building labeled A, that is the microbrewery, microdistillery concept. Going down the way, B is shown to be an office building. It's approximately 75,000 square feet. K is a multifamily apartment building that for right now, we are anticipating that that would likely be the apartment building that would be age restricted to 55 and older. C is the hotel component of the project. That would be what's shown there is 175 hotel rooms in that building. D is a two-story mixed-use commercial building. So you'd have tuck-under parking off of the new interior road. You know, you could have residences on the second floor. That's been asked. That's not necessarily what we were visualizing. We could have a work-live type of component where somebody has a service-related business below. E is a restaurant. My list is in different order than the picture, of course, which makes it a little trickier here. So it's about an 8,000 square foot restaurant for E. And then if we go to the north side of the street, N is the first building in the foreground. That's a 6,000 square foot mixed use commercial building. O is a 18,000 square foot single story mixed use commercial building. This shows Navigate in its new location, staying. Q is a 3,400 square foot mixed use commercial building, and R is an 8,400 square foot commercial building. So that's phase one. So I'm going to go to the slide so where you can see what this table looks like. So those buildings are what are shown in phase one. That's approximately $170 million of the $400 million overall conceptualized plan. In our world, we think of phasing as phase 1, 2, 3, sometimes for different reasons. And those buildings could change and the order that things happen a little bit. Things could go faster or slower. They're not necessarily defined by some legal reason. You know, if there were a reason to do a building in phase 2 during phase 1, we would have the latitude to do that going through the process. Phase 2. So I don't know if my mouse will work here. So we left off with F, which is the little orange building on the south side right here next to the blue building. F is a 8,000 square foot restaurant. G is another 75,000 square foot office building. H is an 8,000 square foot restaurant. M is a parking structure in the middle. That's what the white is. And the yellow is a multifamily building wrapping that. Then moving to the north side, again, S is a 8,000 square foot mixed use commercial building. T is a 9,800 square foot mixed use commercial building. And then in phase 3, I is the destination entertainment concept that was discussed earlier. That's showing about 22,000 square feet of interior building space and then a lot of outdoor activated space. J is also a multifamily building, as well as V is a multifamily building. U is an 8,300 square foot mixed use commercial building. I think I covered all of those. That was not super easy. Is there any questions about any of that? Do you want me to recap anything there? Okay.
No, I think we're good.
So, like I said, when we came to the table, PGAV had already put together a conceptualized plan based on the feedback that you all had received from the city and your city engagement process. we believe that everything that we're showing, oh, I did miss the townhouse building. I do need to go back to that. L is the yellow boxes between K and M, and those are townhouses. My apologies. We don't believe we were showing any use that was not compatible with what the city had heard through their process with PGAV. So there's a lot of meat in this material here, kind of in the project summary narrative and how we complied with certain requirements in the RFP. So it was obviously important for us to be respectful of the zoning district that was put in place by the city before we were ever involved through the RFP process. So part of the requirement is to outline that. So MC is the Manchester Corridor Commercial Zoning Regulations, which govern everything. So there's 4 bullet points that we called out in our response that would be potential variations to that plan. The rear yards on the south side of Manchester may not have site-proof fences. The goal there is to preserve views to and from the GRG trail that is so important to this project. The second is access to the GRG trail. It currently specifies that every building have direct access. What we're showing is that each phase of the development along the south side of Manchester would have a GRG trail connection and be internally connected so as to have less impervious space. The north side of Manchester would utilize the new underground tunnel, so we'd make sure that there was connectivity throughout the north side to the tunnel. The facade orientation on certain buildings on the south side of Manchester, especially the multifamily buildings' main facades, may not be oriented to face the principal street on which it has frontage. What that means is K and M, so the 2 multifamily buildings towards Brentwood, are shown as being open-faced garages facing Manchester. The reason for that is the way that we're achieving the required parking for the office buildings and the hotel was to increase the parking in the multifamily structures. There's logistical issues if you have apartment units between those other users and that parking. And we'll go through some precedent imagery later for how you can have a parking garage in that scenario but not even know that you're looking at a parking garage. So we'll go through that. And then the major internal circulation roadways will include angled and parallel parking. That's the new road on the south side that runs parallel to Manchester. Parking, our intent as what's shown, meets the requirement in the code, but for, we do anticipate requesting parking reductions which cater to shared and joint parking, which is outlined and contemplated in the code for this district. We would request a parking variance as low as 1 space per unit for multifamily buildings J and V. Those were the only zoning related issues. There's been a lot of questions raised in many meetings around the country that I've had around what we mean when we say workforce housing, because it's kind of a scary concept if we don't know what it is. So we always like to try to explain that. So I'm going to attempt to do this. So we made this slide to hopefully try to make it a little bit easier. We look at housing options as a continuum from the people in society who are kind of the most at need to the most affluent. So this very simple graphic is meant to help with that. I hope it's not more confusing. On the left side of the screen, people often refer to Section 8 housing. Section 8 housing is a federal program that HUD administers. What that means is, people who are the most at need pay 30% of their income, and HUD makes up the difference to whatever that market rate apartment is. Next to that, you have LIHTC, which stands for the Low Income Housing Tax Credit, which is codified into the IRS tax code under the Reagan administration. Really took how we housed people away from local housing authorities and standardized it with the federal government. It's a very competitive tax credit program that the state agencies issue on behalf of the federal government. And I'll explain what AMI means in just a second. Workforce housing is a concept that we really started working hard on about 3 years ago. Does not use any federal or state subsidy like a tax credit program. And then at the end, you have just market rate luxury housing. And that, you charge whatever you want. It's just what the market demands. So when we say AMI, that stands for the area median income. That is derived through the census process. And then HUD publishes what those rates are for any given community. So 30% AMI is a deep level of poverty. The LIHTC program caters to people who make between 40 and 60% of the area median income. Our definition of workforce housing that we have vetted through the OCC and through our banking partners is that's 80 to 100% of the area median income. So for context, in this community, a household of two making $60,800 a year for that household of two is 80% of the area median income, for context. So what we've committed to do, and this is not unique to Brentwood, we attempt to do this everywhere we're developing new housing, is to have some portion of this new wonderful product be at what we're finding in more and more communities that we work is that this workforce housing concept is something that a lot of communities struggle with, and cities realize that, and so they try to put something in the requirements to make developers do it, which is great. But what you end up with is a very reactionary approach, which isn't usually great. Our goal is to, by having a programmatic solution to that, it allows first responders, teachers early in their career, or retired folks, who want to stay in their community but don't want to necessarily pay the higher level rent to be able to do it. I'll switch back to my other thing, if I'm able to. So the presentation also talks through connectivity, infrastructure improvements, sustainability. I'm not going to go through those things. It's all in the written thing. I think we're all on the same page. I would say to our founder, Phil Hulse's credit, early in Green Street's history, he went into very difficult parts of North St. Louis City, really bringing revitalization back to areas that were kind of disinvested industrial parts of town that were really focused on job creation in our communities. And for that to work, he's really an expert at working with folks, everyday folks, not the Walmarts of the world, but local manufacturers like we heard from earlier tonight. So really, to Phil's credit, that's where he shines, is working with people who just need to be in a spot. It sounds cliched, we're from here, like we're everybody's neighbors, we didn't blow in from Chicago and are trying to hoodwink you and leave town. So the worst thing we can ever do is go in and do something to a community that has really unpleasant side effects. So the reality is there's federal requirements that we have to do relocation. So we hate talking about eminent domain. I think all real estate developers do. It's an unpleasant tool. It's not something we've ever used before on any project we've ever done. It is something that the 353 redevelopment agency has, and that's really been kind of glommed onto. Once the city chooses us, hopefully as the partner with this project, one of the first things we'll do is go meet one-on-one with every single owner. To the extent we're able to meet with tenants who aren't building owners, that's what we'll do. If there's the ability to work with folks to stay in this corridor because of the phasing that we're doing, that would be great. There's no benefit to us displacing people from a community. And I believe that our reputation would speak to that. Part of the RFP requirement also is, what are we going to ask for to be able to do the project? And so we've put in here on slide 17 the way that we're currently looking at this deal from a city participation standpoint. So what's outlined in here is that the city, BRC, and the state have acquired some property to date. And we are asking here for that to be contributed into the project. And there is also the concept that was mentioned earlier about putting a community improvement district or transportation development district in place, potentially using new market tax credits, using Chapter 100 bonds, which is a state level sales tax incentive on construction materials. And then, as was mentioned, the tax abatement piece that we discussed, which is on the next slide. So we engaged Development Strategies, which is a local firm that's similar to PGAV, They're, a disinterested third party. And they prepared what's called a cost-benefit analysis. This is the slide that has a typo on it. So it says the project will generate a total of $266.3 million in new revenue. That number is really $209 million. That is reflected in the development strategies report that's attached in our official submittal. I didn't want to change this and have a disconnect with what we officially had presented. So they're showing a total of $209 million of new revenue to the city over 27 years. $41.7 million of that's to local taxing jurisdictions, and $51.6 million of that is to the Brentwood School District. We have met with the Brentwood School District. They asked some additional questions on that calculation. Several attorneys much smarter than me and accountants much smarter than me engaged with the district CFO to vet through those things. I believe that everybody is in agreement with that number now. And that is contemplating using a Chapter 353 tax abatement of 90% for 10 years. So those numbers are with the tax abatement that was requested. Another question that's always very rightfully so asked is, man, you're going to put quite a few apartments here. What's that going to do to our school system? The same smart people at Development Strategies have a methodology where they do that math. Their calculations are that 12 to 18 new students is what they would forecast at that's all levels K through 12, which I believe they are comfortable with based on some of the recent improvements. We're estimating there'll be 1,200 construction jobs created and 1,200 post-construction jobs that are able to be in the area partly because of the 2 office buildings. And as I mentioned, the full cost benefit analysis is attached and available to the public. So I defer to you. There's one of these for every single building. I can go through each one, all 23 if you'd like. They're all there for reference. These numbers match what was in the table previously. The bottom of every page has a red circle around the building in question, so this makes it a little bit easier to try to reference through this.
Joel, just for clarification, your presentation, is that available on the city webpage? Okay, just so the residents, and I see somebody waving it, great, okay, fantastic. I don't see any need for you to go through all those because I think it's a little premature at this point to even talk about what the actual buildings are. If the board will remember, all that's being asked of you in this resolution is whether or not, because I don't vote on it, whether or not you appoint Green Street as the master developer, number one. Number two, would you approve a funding agreement which would then allow us to retain PJV to review the numbers? And then number three, to authorize staff to start working on to a redevelopment agreement. So I don't see there's any reason to go into all the buildings, the possible ask on the abatement or anything like that, because again, we're not there yet.
Absolutely.
But I just had just a couple of questions follow up on your presentation. And I will make sure I got this straight. Did you say Green Street's never used eminent domain? Could you repeat what Phil had to say?
Phil said he's been doing this for 23 years and has not utilized it, no.
Okay. And the other question that I have for you is the map, or the whatever we want to refer to that. It shows all these locations for buildings and different buildings. And we've heard a number of residents tonight talk about their concern that, we spent a lot of money to buy properties, to demo buildings, to allow that to hold the floodwaters for Deer Creek. And are we kind of being counterproductive? Are you going to start looking at putting buildings in the locations where we already demoed buildings?
Sure. So I think the two things to that, it's been pointed out that the multifamily building to the left, for instance, shows a swimming pool on the bottom of that building for those residents. The reality is you have a detention basin going there. So I'm not going to put a swimming pool in your very carefully engineered area that's to mitigate the flooding that's happened. So absolutely not. Secondly, when the city engaged in the exercise of choosing a developer to partner with, what you didn't want to do is just choose somebody who talked a great game, right? Our goal is to show you this is what we envision based on what you're telling us your community has wanted. So we believe that this fills a lot of needs that are out there. Is this exactly where every building would go? No, it's not. You know, are there buildings in the footprint that when it's all said and done would be preserved? That's very possible. Was that in the confines of the RFP response? No. It was to take what PGAV put together, opine on it, and then present something to you. The other thing I always remind people is MSD creates a lot of messes, but they have a really hard situation to start with. You know, they're very old systems in St. Louis. And I would venture to say that none of the buildings along here, like everywhere else in St. Louis, have stormwater mitigation in place. So anything new that gets built, they bring back to what they call a green standard. They don't care if it's a parking lot with a building on it. They say, as far as we're concerned, this is a green field, and you need to treat it as such. How are you going to deal with stormwater? Right. So by building new buildings in this corridor, it will actually help with that because you'll retain all of that water on site.
Sure. Okay. I would open the open up for questions, but again, I would encourage you to try to limit them to the matter that's in front of you. Again, so Alderman Plufka.
Thank you. I have three questions. The first question is, this is before us as a resolution, but it's not being decided on tonight?
Well, I'm going to ask you, the board, about that. It's a great time to bring that up. It is a resolution, and for those who are watching, normally resolutions are voted on the night that they're brought up in front of the board. My request is, my suggestion, and my hope was that we not do that tonight, but that we put it off for the next Board of Aldermen meeting, so that it gives you a chance to talk to your residents, your constituents, and explain it to them. What I found out from Green Street is Joel's unavailable. September 5th is Labor Day. That would be the next board meeting, but since we won't be open, it'll actually be on the 6th of September. Joel is unavailable on the 6th of September. So I believe what we would do is roll it over to September 19th. And that's, again, that would be my choice on what to do with this resolution. So, but that's up to you guys later on.
I just had two other questions then. So, hearing some of the feedback tonight, do you have I mean, you mentioned it just slightly with regard to some retail, and I'm assuming with commercial, you're equally diligent about wanting to keep commercial endeavors in the area if that's possible. You've mentioned more than once that you intend to stay on as owner and manager of the residences. Is that same intention with the buildings that are commercial and retail?
Generally speaking, yes. There are certain users we've talked to that are interested in owning their own building for various reasons. In those cases, we would likely develop the building for them, and then they would be an owner occupant of their building.
Okay, and then the last question I had, Mr. Mayor, was I asked you actually during the 353 presentation about you told me about the school board tax benefit of $50 million plus over a certain number of years, and I asked whether you could give me that information year over year, and you weren't able to do it at the time. Have you been able to do it since?
We do, yes. So the school district asked the same questions, and so a memo was put together for the CFO of the school district that has a lot of the school district specific information extracted. And I think
I'm being told by our city administrator she's going to send it to the board.
I will tell you, it is in this 100-page analysis they did. It's much easier if you look at her. It's the same information, it's just extracted.
And that's fine. We've got time before we're actually voting on the resolution. I wanted to make sure I read that before. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Alderman Lockmuller.
Joel, you've mentioned there's 660 units here. Excuse me. You know, if those are 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, you've got a pretty densely populated area going in there. My ward's only 2,000 people, and we could have 1,200 people, you know, just in that area, 1,200 to 1,500. With that, you've got the multi-level garages. Those tend to be a little bit unsafe. What do you do about security in those type of garages? And are you open to working with our first responders in, you know, a substation maybe located in that area, equipment, anything of that nature?
Yeah, so to the previous question about us owning and operating a majority of our real estate, the largest reason we manage it ourselves is then you can really kind of have much more substantive control, right? Because it doesn't do anybody any good if we develop a beautiful building and somebody comes in and poorly manages it, right? That just creates a bad situation for us, for our residents, for communities. So absolutely. So The way that it would be designed for the garages specifically, they're always secure in projects we do, and there's various ways you accomplish that. You know, there is a question in the K building, there is some overflow parking there for some of the outdoor park space, and there's ways to secure, you know, a majority of the garage and have some that's accessible to folks to come and go. And then absolutely, you know, working with the police is kind of a foregone conclusion. I'd say that that's something we would always want to do.
And I know you've done properties down in the Grove area, and you're doing the Armory right now, I believe. Would you have any problem with maybe taking the board on a tour of some of these places to see
We'd
that?
love to. Phil's a great tour guide. No, absolutely. That would be
Because
great.
I'd like to see what the design looks like, and
Absolutely.
safety, and how they're managed.
Yeah.
and that-
To not violate any of you all congregating, we could set up, you know, several tours with a couple of you at a time. If you'd like to do that, we'd
Yeah.
coordinate
we
with
can
Bolin,
take care of
absolutely.
that.
That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have any other questions? Yeah, Alderman Gould.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of good in this, a lot of good comments that we've received, you know, to date. We've had a lot of great discussion, a lot of good comments from residents and businesses. One of the things that struck me too was to go back to day one, go back to the origins, and I think all of that is available to everybody on the Brentwood Bound site. But one of the questions that we did as a task force to hear from residents and businesses of what land use they'd like to have with this. In the responses, clearly restaurants, small retail outlets, entertainment venues, office development, and other were high on the list. Multifamily residents, hotels, single-family residences, and large retail outlets were significantly lower on the list. So I think there is a question about what the community would like to see down here and where we were in the beginning. I think seeing just a few restaurants populated in there, I'd like to see if you have mixed use, does that mean that there could be a restaurant in there? So when we look at this plan and we see only just a couple of little restaurants, that may not be really what exists there as it relates to mixed use, correct?
Right.
So I think, having a little bit more finer point to definitely the density and some of the fact that the community did say early on, multifamily residences was not really a driver of this. And I do think that having them right along the creek is a concern. So I think, if we do move forward, I'm encouraged to hear you say that this is a concept plan. And I think it's good for everybody to know this is your concept of what could be done as it relates to the RFP. But it doesn't necessarily mean every building is going to be built this way. And I'm encouraged to hear that you are neighbors. I like that you're not a Chicago or New York or some other developer. You will have to live with this as well.
Absolutely true.
So, and you will probably visit these establishments and see our citizens, in there as well. So I'm encouraged by the fact that you're willing to potentially work with maybe even some existing landowners that have viable businesses, work with them to remain owners and build a new plan for them that fits the outmoded, businesses that are down there now, and updates them and maybe retain some things. That could be encouraging to me.
Alderman Waggy.
Yeah, hey, Joel, can you edify me a little bit? So like there are the pink buildings or the salmon buildings, they're listed as mixed-use commercial. What does that mean? Is that like, maybe it's hypothetical, but I understand restaurants and I understand, multifamily, but what does mixed-use commercial, what kind of businesses would that be?
Sure. That's a good question. So what I would say is, so if you're conceptualizing what's on this plan here, I'll do this one's a little easier to see.
I think you lost your feed, by the way.
Oh. Oh, there.
There you go.
Should become an IT professional. That was too easy. So if you look at, a building on the north side, for instance, like Q, that's kind of a smaller footprint building, you know, you could visualize that being a dentist's office or an accountant, right? Like a single use in that building. You know, the mixed use commercial buildings would mean that you would have several tenants in that building because they're larger. So you might have a bakery on the one end and, you know, a veterinarian next door to them.
But then if, you know, so some of the existing businesses, if you were working with them to, you know, find a way that they could stay there, whether it's a new building or something, it's possible that the MC zoning that we put in would not allow that to happen, correct? I mean, and maybe that's probably more an answer than me.
As a use, you mean?
Yes, correct.
Yeah, so I believe, you know, the way that we envision this working is you go back in time, right? If you owned a piece of property or you were a business owner in a floodplain, it becomes very difficult justifying making huge expenditures of money because you don't know how to happen, right? So the city has made this effort to recast this corridor. What you don't want to have happen, right, is piecemeal development where you end up with 6 drive-through sandwich shops, right? Or 5 coffee shops, is what you want. You want something that's a cohesive overall plan of like, and we're going through that process now. If we evaluate the region and we evaluate Brentwood itself, what's not here right now? You know, what would be additive to the community that, you know, if I open, you know, a Dobbs and RPM goes out of business, right, that really wasn't additive, as an example, right? So doing that in a thoughtful way for the whole corridor is very important. And you hope through that process, you're able to accommodate people that want to stay. And the reality is, right, if you just look at market economics, if you own a piece of ground that's in a floodplain versus one that's not in a floodplain, one is usually going to be more valuable than the other. So it may give, I think people automatically go to, well, we couldn't possibly afford to be here anymore. We're just out of hand. Well, that may not really be true if you just think through the market economics of you now own a piece of ground that a year ago was in a floodplain and now it's not, and maybe that affords you the ability, you know, to have a new facility that's upgraded in some way.
Okay. And then it looks like you know, I know we're going to get into, if we go forward with this, we're going to get into traffic studies ad nauseum on this, but it looks like, I mean, really your intent is to limit the number of entries on and off of Manchester and basically pull the traffic around behind the buildings, basically. So you're coming in, and is that accurate?
That is the goal, right? You know, this process is important because it's linear, right? The city and this council and previous mayors have been working on this plan for years. You know, we had a conversation with the previous alderman, I think it was 4 years ago, before any of this had ever happened, right? Like, there's this dream of this thing might happen, right? So we've known, right? And you all have been in the weeds for a very long time. But if you're us, the process is pretty linear, right? What we're trying to do is we responded to your RFP to partner with you. Once we establish, okay, there's a path forward there, then all of those very difficult, heavy lifting things that, quite frankly, take an extraordinary amount of money, an extraordinary amount of time, we do once we know, right, that we're kind of on the same path, right? If you're us, we don't want to put the cart before the horse, start reaching out to owners of the buildings, right? That's a misstep. If I started calling every landowner down here before you've chosen us, I'm just a speculator like any other real estate guy on the street that wants to come buy your building. So doing those steps, if I build a project and the traffic's not very thoughtfully done, it's a horrific experience. I think we all know spots in St. Louis you go to and you're like, oh, who designed this parking lot, right? It's very frustrating. And we don't want to do that, right? Like, we want it to be very thoughtful. We want it to be very intentional.
Okay, and then, you know, I was going to propose tonight that, you know, in the interest of informing our residents, I mean, you know, I've been advising people to watch the YouTube that we have some kind of open house, but kind of thinking about it, you know, maybe with the timing, if we are not taking this resolution up tonight, but later in September, after Brentwood Days, maybe that's an opportunity. You know, we could give Green Street a booth or something and allow them to, you know, take walk-up questions from any residents. I mean, that would be a suggestion I would have, in addition to Steve's of letting us see some of their developments. But, you know, how can we let our residents come in and ask their questions and not, you know, have me try and answer them to my constituents necessarily? So I would propose that. And then one last thing, you know, Alderman Plufka, you know, I watched the 353. I really appreciate your kind of transparency, and I think we got to be transparent with Green Street and the existing business owners. I personally am I am not in favor of the tax abatement. I think maybe there's a little bit there for the workforce housing, but I've been pretty consistent, I believe, and we specifically put a statement in the RFP that you should not expect, tax assistance and eminent domain from the city. I am not in favor of any form of eminent domain for this. We had to do it for the flood mitigation because that's what the citizens told us to do. But I will not be in favor of that, and I just want to be transparent up front that that's just one of the votes, and as well as the abatement. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alderwoman Tice.
Alderman Weggie just mentioned it, but I think probably the thing I've gotten the most questions about is workforce housing. And you went into it a little bit more at the 353 meeting, but could you talk a little about that, about whether it's in one building or spread out throughout all of the potential apartment buildings and what that looks like?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our intention right now is that likely, so if you have 10% of the overall units, so if you're talking about approximately 60 units of workforce housing, those would likely be in one building together. The very important caveat to that statement is those units are never designated as being workforce housing units. So, right, if I go in and I build 200 apartments in a building, the fit and the finish is identical, right? Like some units will be a one bedroom or a two bedroom or three bedroom, right? There's that difference. But, you know, if I'm living in one unit and you're living next to me, and I'm in a market rate unit, you're in a workforce unit, we would never know that unless you shared that with me. And we might move out, and then those two move in, and they're flip-flopped, right? One's in a market rate, one's in a workforce. Like, there's no distinction. You know, there's a notion of like an alley door is what they used to call it when you would have developments and you had, you know, units like that were subsidized differently, and the market rate people came in this door to their units, and those people went in that door to their units. It's not that. I would tell you financing the workforce product is very doable. It's just very complicated because there's not a lot of banks that really understand how that works. That's the largest reason we would put those units together in one building. If I spread them across multiple buildings, it becomes really hard, more complicated to finance all of them. So, you know, we've completed 2 of these now. One is north of Milwaukee, and one is in the Grove here in St. Louis. We see a lot of different groups of people. So there's been some younger people kind of newer into their career that really are very good candidates for that. You sometimes have, you know, kind of people that are later along in life that don't want a house anymore or maybe living on a fixed income, might be good candidates for that. But then there's a really wide swath of people in the middle that are, you know, work at a hospital in a service capacity, you know, or a college professor, a fireman, policeman. You know, it's my wife's 21st year as a public school teacher. She has a lot of colleagues that we talk about, it's hugely interesting to them, right? Because they may not be able to afford to live in kind of the central St. Louis corridor. They may be, you know, driving somewhere further away. Does that cover all that, or is there anything else?
Thank you.
Okay.
No, thank you.
See if anybody else. Oh, yeah, Alderman O'Neill, I'm sorry.
Yes, as a senior, I'd like to discuss the senior housing a bit. This came as a surprise to me. As Alderman Gould said, there were a number of things requested by citizens, and I don't think this was on the list at all. Right now, it seems there are 2 kinds of senior housing. There is housing for very active seniors who do all sorts of things, have all sorts of learning experiences. They're active where the trails will appeal to them. Unless there is a great opportunity to interact among themselves and be active, I can't see that this would be an asset. The second kind of senior is the one who will rent an apartment and need perhaps some sort of physical assistance. And this could very easily turn into assisted living, which is not, I think, what anybody ever thought of when we began this project. So as we work towards this, as we hear more about it, I'm not sure I would support it in its present form, but I welcome the opportunity to see a lot of changes as we discuss this.
Oh, yes, Joel, you want to respond?
So yeah, so I'd say there's 2, that was a meaty statement. There's a lot there to unpack. So when we think about senior housing, you know, there's kind of 2 different concepts that are important. You know, the federal government defines 2 different things when we talk about senior housing. The one is very offensive because it's for people who are 55 plus. That really makes 55-year-olds upset. The other is people who are 62 and older. The requirements are very different and very stringent. What we're thinking here is the 55 and older. If you're in the 62 and older and you have a child or a grandchild, they can't live there. Everybody in the household has to be that age. So that's not what we're thinking about. And then the second concept is what you were referring to is the continuum of care. So on the one end of it, you have active seniors, and the other end is people who need a significant amount of help in their living environment. And that's really more of a medical grade type of facility. And this would very much be the active senior concept. If you go back and watch the meeting minutes, we actually didn't talk about that concept in the first 353 meeting. And that was the most significant feedback we got from anybody who said anything is we really want to have some designated active senior housing. And like I've said, we're here to listen to people. People understand what the need is, and that's when that concept is added in.
Thank you. Alderman Gould?
Yeah, I think when I had made my comments earlier, I realized that I really didn't ask my question. The pointed question that I had is approximately how much percentage, and in our 353 first meeting, I said, hey, density of residential along there is probably not desirable. Let's look at cutting it back. You did. You cut it back a little bit. I think the question is how much percentage would you be willing to potentially cut from residential properties and replace them with other either commercial or businesses, small businesses that allow for the community that exists here and the density that does exist to go to them. I understand that there's a little bit of if you're going to be aggressive and build a big district, you need to build in density. I think our community has density as well as the region around us already does. It's not like it's an area that you need to bring people to it to make it viable, so.
Sure. I'm not going to make up a percentage. We're absolutely open to having the dialogue. I think if you look conceptually at the plan of the area that you have to deal with, you have the benefit of some depth of the lots on the south side, which is why K, M, and J kind of work in that footprint. What you don't want, we've heard, is you don't want big box retail, right? You have some in Brentwood already, and we agree with that, right? I think some people who talked to you said, we want to do, a huge, 150,000 square foot retail spot. We don't want that, right? So could you build a traditional shopping center style here? You probably could. You'd end up cannibalizing yourself because you have a lot of that in other parts of the town already. The reality is you can only support so much local organic retail, right? If you look at downtown Webster is a great example, right? There's a lot of repetitive kind of things that are there, I don't know that you want 4 embroidery shops and 5 banks in this stretch right here. But if you develop in a specific way, that's what you'd end up with. In some yesteryear, would you maybe have gotten a lot of office here? Potentially. That's not the world we live in now. Nobody builds spec office buildings, right? We happen to have 2 users who are interested in locating their headquarters here. That's a good use, right? Those uses support a hotel. So dialogue, absolutely. That's what we want to do with y'all.
Anybody else? Okay, so like I said, my request or suggestion is that we postpone voting on this tonight until September 19th. I'm assuming the applicant doesn't have any objection to doing that. But it's going to be up to you. If you want to take it up tonight, make a motion to approve Resolution 1382. If you want to wait until September 19th, make a motion to table Resolution 1382 to September 19th. Alderman Plufko.
I make a motion that we table this resolution, 1382, to September 19th.
Okay. Do we have a
Second.
Okay, we got a second. Any discussion on that motion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably saying something that everybody else at the table is going to say, but our Ward 1 meeting is on September 13th, and I intend between now and then to reach out to residents within Ward 1 especially to try to get them to come and have a dialogue either by phone or by email or in person at the 13th. Ms. Horvath and others and people who have expressed their concerns tonight, I want to talk to them before I take a vote on this.
Okay. Any other discussion? Yes, I'm sorry, Alderman
Do we
Glockmuller.
need to make a motion for Alderman Weggy's comment about having them come and do an open house?
If somebody wants to do that, I don't know. I think that's up to Green Street if they're willing to. I don't know that we can impose on Green Street to have some type of an open house. City Attorney O'Keefe?
The motion on the floor is to table. I would suggest that you need to take care of the motion on the floor before
Okay.
considering anything else.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor of Alderman Plufka's motion to table Resolution 1382 until September 19th, 2022, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, now, do we take up, or if you want to try and,
How about this?
yeah,
I make a motion that we give Green Street a free booth at Brentwood Days and allow them to interact with our citizens, a double booth, you know, so you can have lots of, 8x12 color glossies and stuff and engage with our residents if they so choose so.
We are happy to work with staff on.
yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure that
No
we.
motion
I don't think we need
All
a
right,
motion
I
for any
retract
of
the
that
motion.
stuff. I'm sure Green Street, I'm sure the folks at Green Street would love to come down and experience Brentwood Days. So we look forward to seeing you.
Thank you all for having us. We
Great,
appreciate
thank
it. We're
you.
looking forward to working with you guys further. Thanks.
Thank you.
Let's move on. Bill number 6380. I will tell you, for all the remaining bills, we are looking for a second read tonight on these, so just a heads up. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a first read of Bill 6380, please? By title only.
Bill number 6380, first reading, an ordinance amending section 115.120 of the Brentwood City Code relating to emergency authority to be executed by the mayor and exercised by the mayor and city administrator.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Bola?
if
Oh, I'm
I
sorry, go
may,
ahead.
this, this legislation is recommended by staff for the board's consideration based on the experience that the city went through with its flooding experience of July and earlier this month. Subsection A of the bill, as before you, is already in the city's code of ordinances. This bill adds subsections B, C, and D, and expands the range of options and tools available to the mayor and city administrator in the face of natural disasters, qualifying natural events, as the ordinance calls it. It allows the mayor to, the option of declaring an emergency circumstance, and I believe if this bill passes, it's the mayor's intent to do that. And upon that action by the mayor, the city administrator, subject to budgetary constraints and reports to the board, is then authorized to engage contractors, waive city fees, and otherwise facilitate property owners and residents' recovery from the natural disaster by cleaning up trash, getting the property restored, getting utilities turned on, getting appliances back in the property and disposed of properly, et cetera. So it's intended to give you a broader and more robust response opportunity.
Thank you. Any questions? So with that, we would like a motion for a second read. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read of Bill number 6380 by title only, please?
Bill number 6380, second reading and consideration for adoption, an ordinance amending section 115.120 of the Brentwood City Code relating to emergency authority to be exercised by the mayor and city administrator.
A motion.
Honor.
Oh, go ahead.
Your Honor, I make a motion to perfect Bill 6380 into ordinance form.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second to perfect into ordinance form Bill number 6380. Any other further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka.
Yes.
Alderwoman Sim.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderman Waggy.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
By a vote of 8-0, Bill 6380 will become ordinance 5031.
Thank you. Next up is the emergency declaration by the mayor, David Dimmitt, upon approval of Bill number 6380. A state of emergency exists in the city of Brentwood by reason of the historical rainfall and resulting flooding events that have taken place in the city in the past 2 weeks. It is prudent and in the best interest of the health and safety of the residents of Brentwood that there be a streamlined and efficient process for implementation of adjustments and regulations, procedures, and practices in a timely manner so as to respond to the health, safety, and welfare needs of our residents. I do have a resolution that I am going to be signing. It's an emergency declaration. Whereas the city of Brentwood has experienced historic rainfall and unprecedented floods in the past days, and whereas Governor Michael Parson has declared a state of emergency in the Brentwood area in response to the devastating natural events, and whereas the resources of the state of Missouri and the United States will be needed to assist in a joint incident response, and whereas an invocation of the provisions of Section 115.120 of the Brentwood City Code is required to ensure the protection of the health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of the city of Brentwood. Now therefore, I, David A. Dimmitt, Mayor of the city of Brentwood, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the state of Missouri, the Code of Ordinances of the city of Brentwood, and Section 115.130 of the Brentwood City Code, do hereby declare that a state of emergency has existed and continues to exist in the city of Brentwood, Missouri, to wit, and that there is a need for emergency response by the city as contemplated by Section 115.120. I further hereby direct and delegate to the city administrator authority to implement any and all of the emergency response measures authorized by Section 115.120. This declaration is effective retroactively to the period beginning July 26, 2022, and shall terminate on September 1st, 2022, unless further extended by a subsequent declaration of similar effect. Signed this 15th day of August, 2022. Thank you. Next up is Bill number 6381. Can we get a first reading of Bill 6381 by title only, please?
Bill number 6381, first reading. An ordinance of the city of Brentwood, Missouri, excuse me, approving a certain second amendment to real estate sale contract with Bi-State Development Agency of the Missouri-Illinois Metropolitan District for the purchase of a portion of real property at 3000 South Brentwood Boulevard and real property at 3120 South Brentwood Boulevard, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause.
Thank you. Is Mark Murray presenting on this?
No, I am.
Okay.
So this is a second amendment to the real estate contract between the city and Bi-State Development Agency. The first amendment was to give sufficient time to do the survey. And after the survey, it has been determined that part of the parcel, 3120 South Brentwood Boulevard, the parcel in the Deer Creek watershed, is not owned by Bi-State. So we have amended the real estate contract, and the cost has now decreased by approximately $13,000. So the city is saving money.
Thank you. Any questions? Alderman Gould.
Yeah, so, and it's hard to tell what part of the parcel it is. Is it right next to the creek, or that they don't own, or
That they don't what?
that they do not own?
They do not own.
I think there are two parcels. There was 3200 and there was
there's 3120. and
3120, right.
It's, yeah, it's
That's-
it's on the
3100
border of the parcel, and it's part of the entire plat that was drawn.
They're actually two separate lots.
Okay.
And so 3100 is the one that we're still going to go ahead and purchase.
Right, the
3120 is
majority
owned
of
by
it.
St. Louis County.
It's owned by the county.
I believe so.
Okay.
According to their records.
So it's not owned by a developer that might,
It's
or
not owned
somebody
by
who can then develop
Bi-State.
it.
It's not owned by Bi-State.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, Alderman
Can
Tice.
I ask where this is in the plot? Like,
We'll provide that to the board.
okay.
Any other questions? Okay, again, we would like to have a second read on this one as well. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor for the second read of Bill number 6381?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. City Attorney. Can we get a second read of Bill 6381 by title only, please?
Bill number 6381, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance of the city of Brentwood, Missouri, approving a certain second amendment to real estate sale contract with Bi-State Development Agency of the Missouri-Illinois Metropolitan District for the purchase of a portion of real property at 3000 South Brentwood Boulevard and real property at 3120 South Brentwood Boulevard, authorizing certain other actions in connection therewith, providing for the effective date of this ordinance, and containing a severability clause.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to perfect Bill number 6382 in an ordinance form.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
Okay, by a vote of 8-0, Bill 6381 will become ordinance 5032.
I'm sorry, yes, 6381. Motion to perfect 6381? Okay, I just want to make sure that it was correct. Okay, next up is item E, bill number 6382.
You said 6382 last time.
I did, didn't I? Yeah. Do we need to clear that up? Do we need a motion to perfect 6381 then? I don't think we had that. I think I misstated.
Thought we did.
Did we?
I'm sorry,
I
it's
was
a bill on
wondering-
the floor, so whatever you referred to it, there's only one bill on the floor that could
Okay.
have been perfected.
Okay, so all right. Well, then we will move on to item E, bill number 6382. Can we get a first reading of bill 6382 by title only, please?
Bill number 6382, first reading, an ordinance approving utility easements with Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, for electric facilities for the Brentwood Bound Improvements Project.
Thank you. Craig, are you presenting on this?
Uh-oh.
We're all out of batteries. Talk fast.
Test.
There we go.
Okay. Craig Schroeder with Navigate Building Solutions again. So at the southern part of Brentwood Park, there are Ameren poles that are going from west to east near the Event Lawn Comfort Station building. So it's always been part of the plan to bury those power lines. Then Ameren will then remove those poles, therefore opening up Brentwood Park to make it more aesthetically pleasing. So before Ameren will do this, you have to grant them easements. So that's what we're requesting tonight, is to grant them easements so they in turn bury those power lines at Brentwood Park.
Great, thank you. Any questions for Craig? We would like to have a second reading on this. Can we
For a
get a
second
motion to
reading,
that
Your Honor?
effect?
I make a
Second.
motion.
We got a motion by Alderman Plufka and seconded for a second read. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read of bill number 6382 by title only, please?
Bill number 6382, second reading and consideration for adoption. An ordinance approving utility easements with Union Electric Company doing business as Ameren, Missouri, for electric facilities for the Brentwood Bound Improvements Project.
Chair would entertain a motion to perfect bill number 6382 into ordinance form.
So moved. Second.
Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka.
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice.
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims.
Yes.
Alderman Weggie.
Yes.
Alderman Gould.
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller.
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill.
Yes.
Alderman Shelton.
Yes.
By a vote of 8-0, Bill 6382 will become ordinance number 5033.
Great, thank you. Next up is bill number 6383. Can we go to the first read by title only, please?
Bill number 6383, first reading, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 5003 and granting approval of a new conditional use permit and site development plan for property at 9001 Manchester Road.
Great, thank you. This is as Whitney comes on down, this is Kitchen Conservatory for, I've lost track, I think the third time they've been in front of this board. But I think it's pretty straightforward. So with that,
Yes, sir. This was the public hearing we had earlier in this evening. The Kitchen Conservatory initially received approval at the beginning of the year. As part of any CUP, the Planning and Zoning Commission reviews the elevations, and those are reflected as part of the approval of that conditional use permit. As they are seeking approval for revised elevations, that is what is bringing forth the amendment for you tonight. We could
yeah, I know the architect, Mr. Chiodini, is here. If there's any questions, I'm not sure we were going to have, let's ask the board if they have any questions about this. Alderman Plufka.
I just had one. What was the reason for the change in the design? That round design was so cool.
That was actually in the 2019, 2020 approval. The change, that got changed to a more square design earlier this year in February. And then the revised elevations included new materials, a architectural CMU. The applicant has indicated that it was due to budget cost. The initial came in too high, and the property owner wanted a more modern style design for the building. So, but I'll
Thank you.
let
No,
the
that's
architect.
fine.
Okay.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
So I just
All
was
right.
curious.
Anybody else have any questions about Bill number 6383? We would like to have a second read on that. Can we get a motion to that effect, please?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we got a motion for a second read, and it's seconded as well. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read of Bill 6383 by title only, please?
Bill number 6383, second reading and consideration for adoption, an ordinance repealing ordinance number 5003 and granting approval of a new conditional use permit and site development plan for property at 9001 Manchester Road.
Great. Can we get a motion to perfect Bill number 6383 in the ordinance form?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Yes, Alderman Gould.
I do have one question, and, thankfully, we have readjusted our planning and zoning committee, and we've got some experts on the committee now that have some architectural background. Were they sufficiently satisfied with kind of the adjustments that were made regarding the CMU that is typically not allowed?
That was discussed at the first meeting at the Planning and Zoning Commission on July 13th. It did get postponed, or it did get discussed at the Site Plan Subcommittee on July 27th. They reported that it was a very good discussion. The vote on the August 10th meeting was 8-1 in favor of the proposal.
Okay.
I will tell you, Alderman Gould, I attended both the site plan and the P&Z meeting where this was brought up. And I'm not an architect, but what I've learned is it's called CMU, but it's not really CMU. It's high quality finish.
Architectural masonry.
Architectural masonry.
It's really just like cast stone, as a matter of fact.
So and the architects on P&Z had a lot of experience with it and spoke highly of
Right,
that.
yeah,
of that
I didn't
material.
see the.
Okay.
I didn't
Great.
see the site plan, but yeah.
Okay, I think we've had a motion to perfect already. With that, no further questions. Roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
By a vote of 8-0, Bill 6383 will become ordinance number 5034.
Great, thank you. This brings us down to item G, Bill number 6384. Can we get a first read by title only, please?
Bill number 6384, first reading, an ordinance approving a subdivision plat for property located at 2339 St. Clair Avenue to create two single-family residential lots.
Great, thank you. Whitney, you want to present on this?
Yes, this is a minor subdivision of an existing lot and includes one half of a recently vacated alley. And it meets with both proposed new lots meet with the requirements of the B single-family zoning district. And
And
therefore,
because it's a subdivision and it meets all the requirements, it's simply a ministerial act?
it is a ministerial act, so the design of the new home and any other review is done at the Architectural Review Board and is part of the building permit and any stormwater improvement
Great, thank you.
permit.
Any questions for Whitney on that? We would like to have a second read on this item as well, please, so we can get a motion to that effect.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on the motion for a second read? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, thank you. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read of Bill 6384 by title only, please?
Bill number 6384, second reading and consideration for adoption, an ordinance approving a subdivision plat for property located at 2339 St. Clair Avenue to create two single-family residential lots.
Okay, Chair would entertain a motion to perfect Bill number 6384 into ordinance form.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
By a vote of 8-0, Bill 6384 will become ordinance 5035.
Great. And finally, last item, Bill number 6385. Can we get a first read by title only, please?
Bill number 6385, first reading, an ordinance amending ordinance number 5004 to approve revised exterior modifications to the existing building at 2428 South Brentwood Boulevard for the offices of St. Louis Cremation.
Great. Whitney?
So as the earlier project, this one also came in over budget, as the applicant has indicated, due to recent project cost and inflation. So therefore, they're looking to just simply modify the existing structure as is, painting it, refreshing it. But we did carry around all of the requirements from the prior approval. It also referenced those prior elevations, so that's why it's before you tonight.
Okay, any questions? Alderman Gould.
Do they still have the agreement, a parking structure agreement built into this?
Yes,
Okay.
that is still built
'Cause-
in, and the applicant, the architect is here and has said that they have done that agreement, so that would be part of any building permit.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Anybody else? Once again, we would like to have a second read, if at all possible, if the board would entertain that.
Make a motion for second reading.
We got a motion, and I think we had a second somewhere down there. Yes, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Mr. City Attorney, can we get a second read of Bill 6385 by title only, please?
Bill number 6385, second reading and consideration for adoption, an ordinance amending ordinance number 5004 to approve revised exterior modifications to the existing building at 2428 South Brentwood Boulevard for the offices of St. Louis Cremation.
Thank you. Chair would entertain a motion to perfect Bill number 6385 into ordinance form.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? Roll call.
Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Weggie?
Yes.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller?
Yes.
Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
By a vote of 8-0, Bill number 6385 will become ordinance number 5036.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Brings us down to item 12, citizen comments. And again, anybody in the public or in the audience care to address the board, now is the time to do so. You'll be given up to 3 minutes. Just come on down and state your name again, please.
Hi, it is late, and I will try and respect everyone's time. This is Dr. Melligan. And there were just a couple of additional comments I wanted to make. First of all, I want to endorse the Alderman's Board decision to table motion, the controversial one, Resolution 1382 till the next meeting. I think that's a wise decision. That being said, I am worried about inertia. You know, these things, I know this RFP was up for close to 2 years. We got one proposal from Green Street, and, you know, several aldermen and alderwomen tonight said, you know, we endorse looking at changes. This is not a final plan. That's all great. But at the end of the day, you know, some things were said that I feel like I did need to correct. You know, there were comments made that there had been no discussion of eminent domain, no discussion of tax incentives, that you folks don't know the first thing about what Brentwood is trying to do here. I take some objection to those. I came prepared, and I think I tried to come educated. I came here looking at minutes, you know, that I came up with this week from the April 26, 2022 Brentwood Redevelopment Corporation, upon which several of you also seem to hold seats on that corporation. This was presented. Page 17, it talks about these things. So I don't know why we can say these things have not been discussed, that they aren't firm. You know, I feel like the common citizens here are going to get crushed under this by acclamation. I can't come to every Board of Aldermen meeting. I'll try and be here for the 9/16 or 9/19 or whichever one it was. But, you know, I urge this group, if Green Street has never used eminent domain, why are they asking for it? I have a problem with people asking for emergency powers that they promise they'll never use. So I'm hoping that if there's a resolution that passes, whether it's in September or future, that you make it clear that this board's position will not support that. That's what I'm asking for, right? We can modify this plan. I realize it's going to take years, but let's not consider certain things that this entire community seems opposed to. So that is my request to this board. I request that we try and limit those things. And I will also draw your attention to the one last thing here, which is that in this proposal, if you read it, there is a summary and a budget from a Clifton Larson Allen Wealth Advisors LLC. It was prepared as part of this proposal, sent to Green Street Development Group. It says unequivocally that this project cannot be funded under them if there is not tax abatement. So I don't know what kind of fantasy we think we're going here, but their financial advisors tell them they won't do it unless they get these incentives. So I'm worried that you're going to just cave, and I hope you don't. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else care to address the board?
Karen Smith, Harrison Avenue. Maybe my comments echo some of the previous comments, but I did appreciate the robust and passionate explanations for the city's position and the work that you've done. But I hope you can appreciate that in the materials that we all have had access to, there was the word eminent domain in there, and incentives. So I think that the individuals that came forward tonight to express their concerns did so in a very professional way. And I hope that you will be considerate of those comments. Redevelopment was added to the project. I don't actually have that communication piece, but there was redevelopment. It was not to the extent that we are seeing here with this current proposal. So I don't think that, although I think, people realize that there probably would be some redevelopment, I just don't think we thought it would be to this extent. I think people were thinking more along the lines of what we've seen recently with like Navigate Solutions and the Kitchen Conservatory. Last two things, the Ward 3 meeting, I'm not sure if I quite understand all the date sequences, but I'm thinking the Ward 3 meeting might be after our next aldermanic meeting. I know the last Ward 3 meeting was canceled, so I don't know if there would be any consideration for trying to get a Ward 3 meeting in August. And then lastly, there were several concerns about Black Creek and the fact that, this project isn't going to help, Black Creek flooding. Galleria was supposed to have a retention basin, that parking lot that they have. They actually took a building down. It was the junior league at one point. They took that building down and built a parking lot that was supposed to hold water back, and it never did. And so I believe Brentwood asked Richmond Heights to look into that, and I believe that Richmond Heights does supposedly hold water back based upon what the original models asked them to do. But I don't know if we could ever ask them to hold it back more, because I've never seen that parking lot flood. It's supposed to hold water, and I've never seen any water really being held back there. And I don't know, the city has invested a lot to make this project happen, and I don't know if, as part of community goodwill, we would work with Richmond Heights to see if there's a way to hold back more water from Black Creek so that it doesn't come through our city as quickly as it does. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, well then we will move on to the final item, and that is, we are not done yet. We've still got to go into closed session. We have 3 items, so I'm asking for a motion to go into closed session pursuant to RSMO, that's Revised Statutes of Missouri, sections 610.021, subsections 1, 2, and 3, legal, real estate, and personnel respectively. Can we get a motion to that effect?
So moved.
I make that motion and to adjourn the meeting from that
Thank you, Alderman Plufko.
executive session.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Wow, okay. Alderman Plufka?
Yes.
Alderwoman Tice?
Yes.
Alderwoman Sims?
Yes.
Alderman Waggy?
Yep.
Alderman Gould?
Yes.
Alderman Lockmiller? Alderwoman O'Neill?
Yes.
Alderman Shelton?
Yes.
Motion carries by a vote of 8-0.